He built an empire with his bare hands and lost everything in a single night. Jae-min Kang, Korean Mafia boss, feared from Seattle to San Diego, the kind of man who walked into rooms and made hardened killers lower their eyes. Then came the crash. Then came the silence. He woke up in a hospital bed unable to move his legs and discovered his wife had already emptied every account, signed the divorce papers, and vanished like smoke. His allies were already dividing what remained. His empire was bleeding out without him, and nobody was coming to save him. If you've ever watched someone lose everything and still choose to rise, this story is for you. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Pato. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight when Jae-min Kang finally opened his eyes. Not the dramatic kind of opening, not the gasp and bolt upright that happened in movies. It was slower and uglier than that. His eyelids peeled apart like something had been gluing them shut, and the first thing he registered was a ceiling. White, institutional. A single fluorescent tube humming above him with the kind of frequency that drilled straight into the base of the skull. He didn't know where he was for approximately 4 seconds. Then the pain arrived, and it answered every question he hadn't yet formed. It started in his lower back. A deep, pressurized ache, the kind that doesn't announce itself so much as settle in like it owns the place. Then his ribs. Then his left shoulder where something pulled sharp and wrong every time his chest rose for breath. He cataloged these things the way he'd always cataloged threats. Quietly, methodically, without moving a muscle more than necessary. Old habit, useful one. What he couldn't catalog was his legs. He tried. He sent the mental signal, the way you do without even thinking about it. The small automatic instruction your brain fires 100 times a day without your permission. Move. Nothing came back. Not pain, not resistance, just absence. A deep, hollow silence where sensation was supposed to be. He tried again. Nothing. His breathing changed, shallow and rapid for exactly 3 seconds before he caught it and locked it down. He was not a man who panicked in front of people, and even alone, the habit held. He stared at the ceiling and breathed through his nose, slow and deliberate, and let the information settle into him like concrete drying around his bones. His legs weren't working. A nurse appeared in his peripheral vision. Young, tired-looking. She glanced at his open eyes with something that wasn't quite surprise and reached for a tablet on the bedside tray. "Mr. Kang." Her voice was professionally neutral. "I'm going to page the doctor. Don't try to sit up." "How long?" he said. His voice came out wrong, dry and cracked and smaller than it had any right to be. 11 days, she said. 11 days. He looked at the ceiling again. "My wife," he said. The nurse's face did something complicated, a flicker of something, hesitation, maybe pity, that she smoothed over fast but not fast enough. He'd spent 20 years reading people for a living. He caught it. "I'll get the doctor," she said, and left without answering. That was answer enough. Dr. Miriam Osei was a compact woman in her late 40s with close-cropped natural hair and the kind of eyes that had delivered terrible news so many times they developed a specific quality, present, direct, and carefully emptied of false comfort. She pulled a chair to his bedside and sat in it like she planned to stay, which Jae-min recognized as a technique. People who were going to tell you something bad didn't stand over you. They sat down. They got level. They prepared for the conversation to take a while. "The accident caused significant spinal cord trauma," she said. "L1 through L3. The swelling has reduced considerably in the past week, which is encouraging, but I want to be honest with you about what we're looking at." "Then be honest," Jae-min said. "We don't know yet how much function you'll recover. The injury is classified as incomplete, which means the cord wasn't fully severed. That's meaningful. People with incomplete injuries can and often do recover significant mobility, but it requires intensive rehabilitation, months of it, and the outcomes vary." She paused. "You'll need to be prepared for the possibility that the recovery is partial." Jae-min stared at her. "Partial," he repeated. "Yes." "Define partial. Walking with assistance, a cane or walker, potentially. Some patients with your injury profile return to near full mobility. Others plateau. We won't know your trajectory until rehabilitation begins and we can assess how your nervous system responds to stimulus. The fluorescent light hummed above them. Somewhere down the corridor, a phone rang twice and stopped. What caused the crash? He said. The police report. I know what the police report says. I'm asking what caused the crash. Dr. Osei held his gaze for a moment. The vehicle's brake lines had been compromised, she said carefully. I understand there's an ongoing investigation. Compromise. There it was. Not an accident, not wet roads or a blown tire or a moment of distraction. Someone had put hands on his car and arranged for this to happen. He'd known it, somewhere in the animal part of his brain, the moment he'd registered the nurse's avoidance. Everything fit together the way things did when a pattern had been laid out in advance. I need my phone, he said. Mr. Kang, I need my phone. Dr. Osei reached into the bedside drawer and placed it on the tray beside him. The screen was cracked. 47 missed calls, 19 unread messages. The battery was at 11%. He scrolled to Hannah Park's number first. Hannah was his personal attorney. Sharp and ruthless and loyal in the specific way that lawyers who knew everything about you could afford to be loyal, which was completely and without reservation, because the alternative was mutually assured destruction. She picked up on the second ring. Jaemin. Her voice had an edge to it. Not relief. Something more guarded. Tell me, he said. A pause. Long enough that he knew it was bad. Serafina filed for divorce 6 days ago, Hannah said. She's citing irreconcilable differences and requesting an emergency distribution of marital assets. The accounts... Another pause. Shorter, but heavier. The personal accounts were drained 3 days after the accident. She had access. The phone felt heavy in his hand. How much? Combined liquid assets from the personal accounts? Approximately 4.2 million. The business accounts are frozen pending the investigation into your incapacity, but she filed a separate motion claiming you're mentally incompetent and requesting a court-appointed conservator to manage your affairs. She filed a conservatorship claim. Yes. While I was unconscious. Yes. The fluorescent light hummed. Jaemin's fingers tightened around the cracked phone. He was aware of his breathing, still slow, still deliberate, still controlled, and he was aware that the control was costing him more than usual. Who's representing her? He said. Warren Chu's firm. Warren Chu. He knew the name. One of the most aggressive asset protection attorneys in Los Angeles, which meant Serafina had retained him before the accident. You didn't call Warren Chu in the immediate aftermath of your husband's near-fatal crash. You called Warren Chu when you were prepared. She planned this, he said. It looks that way, Hannah said, quietly, without decoration. How long? I don't know yet, but Jaemin, I need to tell you something else. Dae-hyun has been calling your brother. He's been in contact with 3 of your lieutenants, Park, Shin, and Cho. The calls started 4 days after the accident. Jaemin closed his eyes. His brother, Dae-hyun, older by 6 years, meaner by a lifetime, and hungry in the particular way of men who'd watched someone else take what they believed was rightfully theirs. Jaemin had built the network from a street-level operation in Koreatown into something that stretched the length of the West Coast. Dae-hyun had contributed nothing and resented everything. Get me out of this hospital, Jaemin said. You can't be moved yet. Dr. Hannah, Jaemin, you have spinal cord trauma. You cannot be moved before, then find out what conservatorship hearing date she's filed for, and get me a rehabilitation facility recommendation. Not here, somewhere private. Okay, Hannah said. She knew when arguing was finished. I'll call you back in 2 hours. He hung up. The phone battery hit 9%. He set it down on the tray and looked at his hands. Both of them, laid flat on the blanket over his useless legs. His hands still worked. His hands were still the same hands that had broken a man's jaw in a parking garage in 2019, that had signed contracts worth 8 figures, that had steadied a gun on 2 separate occasions and pulled the trigger without flinching. His hands worked fine. His legs did not. He was 41 years old, lying in a hospital bed with a cracked phone and 11% battery, and everything he had spent his entire adult life building was being dismantled by the 2 people he had made the fundamental error of trusting. He did not cry. He hadn't cried since he was 12 years old and learned that crying in front of the wrong people cost you more than it gave you. He just stared at his hands until the doctor came back to discuss his rehabilitation options, and he listened to everything she said, and he asked the right questions, and he said very little. But something was happening behind his eyes, something cold and deliberate and extremely patient. He was thinking about what came next. Set. The rehabilitation facility was called Meridian Recovery Center, and it sat in Pasadena at the end of a long driveway lined with California pepper trees that nobody had trimmed in a while. Private, expensive, discreet. Exactly the kind of place where a man who ran illegal operations across 3 states could receive medical care without it becoming a news item. He arrived by private medical transport on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks after waking up. The move had been a bureaucratic war. Dr. Osei had argued, Hana had negotiated, and Jae-min had simply stated his position once and then refused to engage further, which was usually how things got resolved when he was involved. They put him in a room on the 2nd floor with a view of a garden that someone was clearly trying very hard to maintain and almost managing. A climbing jasmine vine on the back fence, a stone bench, overgrown grass around the edges that suggested the groundskeeper had other things going on. He hated it immediately and said nothing about it. For the first 3 days, 2 different physical therapists came in, assessed him with practiced efficiency, and gave him exercises designed to maintain circulation and begin stimulating what residual function might be present below the injury level. The exercises were humiliating in the specific way that all rehabilitation is humiliating. You are reduced to a version of yourself that can barely perform the things a toddler does without thinking, and you perform them in front of strangers who watch your effort with professional detachment and write things down. He did every exercise without complaint and without conversation. On the 3rd night, Hana called. The conservatorship hearing is scheduled for 6 weeks from now, she said. Judge Helena Marsh. Serafina's team has filed a 40-page psychological evaluation report claiming that your injuries, combined with your, and I'm quoting here, history of criminal associations and volatile temperament, render you incapable of managing your personal or financial affairs. They found someone to sign off on that. Dr. Clayton Reeves. He's done 4 depositions for Warren Chu's firm in the past 2 years. He's never met you. Of course he hasn't. We can counter with our own evaluation. But Jae-min, there's a broader problem. The media has the story. Someone leaked the divorce filing. It's on 3 entertainment blogs and 1 actual news outlet. They're framing it as... She stopped. Say it. They're framing it as a mob boss's empire crumbling after he was incapacitated. Serafina gave a statement. She said she feared for her safety throughout the marriage and that she had no choice but to leave when she had the chance. The garden outside his window was dark. The jasmine was just a pale shape against the fence. She feared for her safety, he repeated. Yes, he considered that for a long moment. Serafina Vale, whom he had met at a charity gala in San Francisco 7 years ago, who had been sharp and beautiful and completely aware of exactly who and what he was when she married him. The woman who had spent $4.2 million of their money before he was even conscious enough to know it was gone. What about Dae-hyun? He said. He's been meeting with Park and Shin in person. They had dinner in Koreatown 2 nights ago. I don't have anything concrete yet, but Jae-min, Cho reached out to me, quietly. He says Dae-hyun is representing himself as taking over operational management on a temporary basis. Temporary? That's the word he used. Dae-hyun, who had spent 30 years being passed over, overlooked, dismissed, first by their father, then by circumstance, and finally by the sheer force of Jae-min's own trajectory. Dae-hyun, who was not stupid but was reckless in the way that resentment always made people reckless, who would make promises he couldn't keep to people who would eventually lose patience and become problems. Tell Cho to keep watching, Jae-min said. Tell him nothing changes. Tell him I am handling things. Are you handling things? He looked at his legs under the blanket. Still. Useless. I'm working on it, he said. She arrived on a Thursday. He didn't know it was significant at the time. Significant things rarely announce themselves. They just show up, and you only understand what they were later when you're looking back from somewhere else. The regular morning shift aide, a quiet man named David, had been pulled to cover a staffing shortage on the 3rd floor. The replacement walked into Jaemin's room at 7:45 in the morning without knocking, which already told him something about her, set down a medical supply tray with a firm click that told him something else, and said, "I'm Zaria Brooks. I'm your caregiver for the next 2 weeks while David's covering upstairs. You need anything explained about how I work?" He looked at her. Zaria Brooks was a black woman in her mid-30s with the kind of face that had been through something and come out cleaner for it. Not softer, cleaner. Strong jaw, eyes that assessed rather than assumed. She wore her hair natural, pulled back, and she carried herself with the specific posture of someone who had learned a long time ago that she would not be making herself smaller for anyone's comfort. She was looking at him the way nobody had looked at him in the 3 weeks since the accident. Not with pity, not with deference, not with the careful, managed distance of medical professionals maintaining professional neutrality. She was just looking at him, like he was a person, like he was a problem to be solved, and she was deciding how to approach it. "No," he said. "Okay." She picked up his chart, read it. Not performatively, actually read it, turning pages, going back to recheck something. "You haven't been doing your afternoon range of motion sequence," she said. "I do the morning sequence. You're supposed to do both. The afternoon one conflicts with my calls." She looked up from the chart. "Your calls?" "Business calls. They run long." "How long?" "Long enough." She set the chart down. "How about this?" she said. "We move the afternoon sequence to 6 p.m. That give you enough time for your calls?" He looked at her. "Usually," he said. "Good. I'll be back at 6. She picked up the supply tray. "Do you want breakfast now or after the morning session?" "After." "Then let's start." She said it the way someone says "let's go" when they mean I'm already going, keep up, or don't. Not aggressive, not impatient, just forward-moving, like there was no alternative under consideration. He found, to his own mild irritation, that he didn't have an objection to this. Oh, she was hard on him from the beginning, and not in the way the other staff were hard on him. Not with the performed encouragement of people saying, "That's great, just a little more. You're doing so well," when what they meant was, "Please don't be difficult." Zaria didn't say those things. When he completed a set correctly, she said, "Good," and moved on. When his form was wrong, she said, "Your hip is rotating left, start over." When he gave less than he had, she said, "I know that wasn't everything you've got." The first time she said it, he looked at her with the kind of flatness that had made people in his orbit very careful, very fast, for 20 years. She didn't flinch. "You can look at me like that all you want," she said. "I've been looked at worse by people with better reasons. Are you going to start over or not?" He started over. This became in small ways the shape of their days. He didn't tell her who he was. He assumed she'd been briefed to some degree. Meridian was private enough that the staff operated on a need-to-know basis about their patients' backgrounds. But he didn't offer details, and she didn't ask. She treated him with the straightforward practicality of someone who had cared for difficult patients before, and had long since stopped being impressed or intimidated by the varieties of difficulty people brought with them. By the end of the first week, he had learned 3 things about her. 1, she'd had a previous patient who'd been paralyzed in a construction accident, a man named Marcus, who'd gotten back on his feet after 14 months and now ran a landscaping company in Fresno. She mentioned him matter-of-factly, not as a motivational anecdote, but as a data point. This had happened. People recovered. Moving on. 2, she took her lunch alone on the second-floor fire escape, eating from a container she brought from home and reading something on her phone without earbuds in, which he registered as someone who was comfortable with their own company. 3, she had a scar that ran from the inside of her left wrist to a point about 3 inches below her elbow. He noticed it on the 4th day when she was repositioning his left leg and her sleeve pulled back. She didn't cover it when she caught him looking. She just rolled the sleeve back down and continued with what she was doing, and neither of them said anything. He didn't know her story. He didn't ask. But he filed it away with the careful attention he gave to all information that might eventually be relevant. The second week brought Hannah in person. She arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in a charcoal blazer with a leather portfolio under her arm and the expression of someone who had been managing bad news long enough to have developed a specific face for it. She sat across from him in the rehabilitation room while Zaria documented the morning session notes at the far end of the space, near enough to be present, far enough to not be involved. The hearing is in 4 weeks, Hannah said. Serafina's team has added to their filing. They're introducing 3 witness statements claiming you were, and again I'm quoting, mentally unstable and dangerously volatile in the 2 years prior to the accident. Who signed those? Hannah laid 3 pages on the tray table in front of him. He looked at the names. 2 of them he barely knew. Peripheral figures, the kind of people who appear in the background of your life and whom you'd never have suspected of harboring opinions strong enough to be weaponized. The third was a man named Kevin Tran, who had worked in the logistics arm of Jamin's organization for 4 years and who had been let go, quietly and without incident, 18 months ago, after Jamin discovered he'd been skimming. Tran got a deal, Jamin said. It wasn't a question. Almost certainly, Hannah said. We can challenge the admissibility and the credibility. But Jamin, there's something else. In reviewing the accounts, I found evidence that Serafina began moving money 11 months before the accident. He went very still. Show me, he said. Hannah pulled up a document on her tablet and set it in front of him. The transfers were methodical, small enough individually not to trigger automatic review flags, consistent enough in their pattern to tell a story. From the personal accounts to a holding account he hadn't known existed. From there to a private entity registered in Nevada under a name that took Jamin a moment to recognize. And then he had it, sudden and cold like a knife through paper. Morella Consulting, LLC. Morella was Serafina's middle name. 11 months of quiet, patient theft, while she ate breakfast across from him. While they attended functions together and she laughed at the right moments, and touched his arm in that way that had once seemed genuine, while he ran his empire and assumed in the arrogant way of men who believe themselves too perceptive to be deceived that he knew his own house. She was planning to leave before the accident, he said. Yes, the accident, he stopped, thought about brake lines, compromised. The police investigation that had gone quiet in ways that investigations sometimes went quiet when the people involved had resources. The accident may not have been an accident. Hannah was very still. Jamin, I'm not accusing anyone, I'm saying. He looked at her. I'm saying we need to know who had access to that car in the 72 hours before it happened. That's, Hannah exhaled, that's a very serious direction. I know what direction it is. From the far end of the room, he heard the quiet sound of Zaria setting down her pen. He glanced over without turning his head. Just peripheral motion, old reflex. And she was looking at her notepad, apparently absorbed. But her pen was still. She'd heard him. He stored that too. 3 days later, Daehyun came. Jamin had been expecting it. The only question had been timing, and Daehyun had always had a weakness for waiting slightly too long, the hesitation of someone who needed to feel more certain than the situation warranted before committing. He arrived in the afternoon, wearing a suit that cost more than it should have on his legitimate income, and he stood in the doorway of the rehabilitation room and surveyed Jamin in his wheelchair with an expression that he was not quite skilled enough to arrange correctly. It was trying to be concern. It looked like appetite. Jamin, he said. Daehyun. Jamin's voice was flat. Sit down. Daehyun sat. He was a larger man than Jamin, broader through the shoulders, slower in every other way. He'd always relied on the physical presence, on the elder son authority their father had granted him by default, before withdrawing it entirely when it became clear which son actually had what it took. The resentment of that withdrawal had defined the next 30 years of Daehyun's life in ways he was too proud to acknowledge and too damaged to overcome. You look better than I expected, Daehyun said. Tell me what you've been doing, Jamin said. A beat. I don't know what you... Park. Shin, the dinner. Tell me what you've been doing. Daehyun's jaw tightened. Someone's been talking. Someone's always talking. Answer the question. I've been stabilizing things, Daehyun said. The word stabilizing came out carefully, like he'd rehearsed it. While you've been here. There are operations that need management, decisions that need to be made. You were unconscious for 11 days, Jamin. And now I'm not. And now you're... Daehyun's eyes dropped briefly, involuntarily, to the wheelchair. He pulled them back up. Things need to be managed. By you. I'm your brother. You're my brother who hasn't been meaningfully involved in my operations for 8 years. My brother who I gave 4 legitimate business interests to keep him comfortable and employed and out of the way. My brother who went to dinner with 2 of my lieutenants while I was in a hospital bed to discuss temporary management arrangements. He watched Dae-hyun's face process all of this. What did you promise them? Dae-hyun said nothing. What did you promise Park? Jaemin said. The import contract he's been angling for? The Incheon connection? What? You're in a wheelchair, Dae-hyun said. The gentleness was gone. There it was. The real thing underneath. You can't run this from a rehabilitation center. You can't run this if you never walk again, and somebody has to, or it falls apart, and everything you built goes with it. You should be grateful. Grateful. The word came out of Jaemin's mouth and sat in the air between them like a stone on water. Dae-hyun stopped. Get out, Jaemin said. Quietly. The quiet he used when the volume wasn't necessary anymore because the weight of what he meant was carrying itself. And tell Park and Shin that I will be in contact personally within the week. Any conversations they have with you between now and then will be logged as insubordination and handled accordingly. Jaemin, I said get out, Dae-hyun. His brother left. The door didn't quite close properly behind him, an old habit. The passive resistance of a man who'd been dismissed since childhood and expressed it in small, deniable ways. Jaemin sat in the quiet of the room for a moment, hands in his lap, looking at nothing. Then Zarya appeared in the doorway. She'd been in the corridor, giving him privacy, he realized, which she'd done without being asked. 6 o'clock session, she said. Matter of fact, no commentary on what she'd likely overheard some part of. He looked at her. Yeah, he said. She came in and began setting up without ceremony. The 6 o'clock sessions became the part of the day he thought about at other times. Not because they were pleasant. They weren't, not often. His body resisted, plateaued, occasionally produced small victories that felt enormous and were statistically modest. The work was grinding and incremental, and frequently painful in the deep, discouraging way that rehabilitation pain was painful, which was not the sharp pain of injury, but the dull, accumulated pain of asking something broken to do more than it wanted to. But Zarya was there, and her presence had a quality he hadn't expected and couldn't quite account for. She didn't pretend things weren't hard. She didn't manufacture optimism. When a session was a setback, she said, that happens, we adjust, and actually adjusted. Modified the approach, tried a different sequence, thought through what might work better, and explained her reasoning to him like he was a person capable of understanding it and participating in the decision, which almost no one in the facility had been doing. They all spoke to him in the careful, slightly simplified language of medical authority. We'll try this. We think this is best. But Zarya said, here's the problem. Here's what I think might work. What do you think? It should have been a small thing. It didn't feel small. One evening in the 3rd week, after a session that had pushed him harder than usual and left him sweat-soaked and spent in a way that he had stopped having the energy to resent, she handed him a water bottle and sat down in the chair across from him instead of immediately beginning the cool-down notes. Your brother's going to come back, she said. He looked at her. I was in the hallway, she said. I heard enough. And people like that don't stop when you tell them to. They wait. They find a different angle. Jaemin said nothing. He was aware that this was a line, that she was crossing from caregiver to something harder to categorize. And he was also aware that she knew it. She wasn't crossing it carelessly. My father was like that, she said. Not the same situation, but the same type. She paused. When you tell a person like that to leave, they hear, not now. You need to actually remove them. I know that, he said. I know you know that, she said. I'm not telling you because you need to be informed. I'm telling you because sometimes it helps to hear someone else say it out loud. She stood. Cool down, 10 minutes. He watched her cross the room to the supply cabinet. There was something about her, something in the economy of the way she moved through the world, the absence of wasted energy, that reminded him, uncomfortably, of himself. Not the surface version, the real version. The version that had existed before the car and the hospital, and the particular humiliation of waking up to discover that the world had proceeded entirely without him. He didn't like the reminder. but he found he was looking for it anyway. The call from Hannah came on a Friday night, and it changed the shape of everything. "The police investigation has been officially closed," Hannah said. Her voice was careful, controlled in a way that meant she was managing a reaction. "The ruling is mechanical failure, brake line degradation due to improper maintenance." "Improper maintenance," Jamin repeated. "Yes." The car had been serviced by his regular mechanic 11 days before the accident. He knew this because he'd scheduled it himself, because he was meticulous about his vehicles, because the idea of a mechanical failure in a car that had been serviced 11 days prior and was less than 2 years old was roughly as credible as the idea that the Earth had decided to inconvenience him personally. "Someone got to the investigation," he said. "That's my read," Hannah said. "But Jamin, without a reopened investigation, we have nothing to prove it. The civil case, the conservatorship, none of that incorporates what happened to the car unless we can get the investigation reopened. And right now I don't have enough to take to anyone who would do that." "Who ran the investigation?" "Detective Marcus Webb, robbery homicide, but it got reassigned to traffic division. That's unusual for a case with the initial indicators this one had. Traffic division. It had been pushed down deliberately, quietly, by someone with access and motivation." "Give me a week," Jamin said. "For what?" "To make some calls." He hung up and sat in the dark of his room, his legs still and useless under the blanket, and felt something move through him that was not despair and not anger and not quite hope either. It was older than all three of those. It was the particular cold clarity of a man who has just finished cataloging his situation and begun deciding what to do about it. Someone had tried to kill him. Someone had stolen from him. Someone was trying to take the last thing he had left. He couldn't walk. He couldn't run. He was in a rehabilitation facility in Pasadena with a cracked phone and a 4-week countdown to a courtroom that might take everything. But he was awake. He was thinking. And the people who thought they'd finished him had made a critical error, one that almost every person who'd ever underestimated him had made at various points in his life, to various degrees of regret. They'd mistaken stillness for surrender. He reached for his phone. He had calls to make. He was halfway through the second call, his voice low and precise in the dark, when his door opened without a knock. He turned sharply, an old reflex firing. But it was Zaria, and she stopped in the doorway the moment she registered his posture. "Sorry," she said. "Late rounds. I saw your light." He lowered the phone. She wasn't leaving. She was standing in the doorway with the expression of someone who had heard enough to understand the nature of what she'd interrupted, and she was deciding in real time what to do with that. "You should knock," he said. "I'll knock next time," she said. She looked at him directly. Not at the phone, not at the chair, not at the window, or some safe neutral point in the middle distance. At him. "Are you okay?" The question was too simple for the situation. It was also the first time anyone had asked it without attaching either pity or an agenda to it. "No," he said. She nodded, like that was an acceptable answer, like she'd been expecting it and hadn't needed to hear otherwise. "I'll be on the floor until midnight if you need anything," she said. She pulled the door closed. This time it clicked shut properly. Jamin sat with the phone in his hand and the darkness pressing against the window, and the weight of everything he was carrying settled across him like something physical, like a hand on the back of the neck. And then slowly he raised the phone again. He had calls to make. But somewhere, in the lowest register of his thinking, a new thread had started, quiet and involuntary, and pointed in a direction he wasn't ready to look at yet. He was aware of it the way you're aware of a sound you can't quite place, and he kept dialing. He didn't know that Dae-hyun had already moved, that the dinner in Koreatown had been a final conversation, not a preliminary one, and that the document now sitting in Warren Chu's office bore the signatures of 2 men Jamin had trusted with his life. He didn't know that the evidence Hannah was looking for had been sitting, for the past 3 weeks, in a storage unit in Van Nuys, buried under a layer of legitimacy by someone who had helped plan every detail of the night that was supposed to end him. And he didn't know that Serafina had already given her next interview, scheduled for the following morning, in which she would describe, with practiced tears and careful language, the specific moment she had decided that she feared for her life, and name for the first time a person she claimed had helped her. The name was Zaria Brooks. The interview aired at 7:45 in the morning. Jaemin found out about it the way he found out about most things now, through Hana, who called before he'd finished his first cup of coffee, her voice carrying the particular compressed quality of someone who had been awake for hours and had run out of ways to soften what they were about to say. "She named Zarya," Hana said, on camera, by full name. He said nothing. "She told the interviewer that a caregiver at Meridian had been coaching you, that she had developed an inappropriate relationship with you and was actively encouraging you to cut off your support network, meaning Serafina, for financial gain. She implied Zarya had been manipulating a vulnerable patient." "Show me," Jaemin said. Hana sent the clip. He watched it on his cracked phone with the volume low, the morning light coming through the window gray and flat and indifferent. Serafina sat across from an interviewer in a clean white room, wearing something pale and understated that someone had chosen deliberately. Her makeup suggested she might have been crying earlier. Her eyes were dry now, but held the careful redness of recent effort. She was good at this. He'd always known she was good at this. "I tried to stay," Serafina said on the screen. Her voice caught precisely where it needed to. "I tried so many times, but when someone else started, when I saw what was happening with his caregiver, I realized he had already moved on. He had already replaced me, and I had to protect myself." The interviewer asked a follow-up. Serafina tilted her head slightly, the gesture of a woman carefully considering her words. "I know Zarya Brooks," Serafina said. "I know her background. I'm not going to say more than that." The clip ended. Jaemin set the phone face down on the tray table. Outside the window, a maintenance worker was doing something to the irrigation system near the jasmine vine, moving with the slow, uninvested rhythm of someone performing a task they had no particular feeling about. A bird crossed the garden and disappeared. He picked up the phone and called Zarya's cell number. She'd given it to him in the second week, practically, in case he needed to reschedule a session, and he'd stored it without comment. It rang 4 times before she picked up. "I saw it," she said. No preamble. "Where are you?" "Parking lot. I got here early. I saw it on my phone before I came in." A pause. He could hear traffic somewhere behind her voice. A street, engines, the ordinary noise of the world continuing. "She doesn't know me." "I know that." "She said she knows my background." "She was performing," he said. "She doesn't know anything about you. She's doing what she always does. She finds the thing that looks most vulnerable, and she puts a story around it." Silence for a moment. "This is going to follow me," Zarya said. Flat. Not a complaint, just a statement of fact delivered by someone who had learned that facts didn't improve by being softened. Even after it's proven wrong, this kind of thing follows people. He didn't answer immediately because she was right and he knew it, and giving her false reassurance would have been an insult to both of them. "Come up when you're ready," he said. "We'll handle the session." Another silence. Longer. "Okay," she said, and hung up. She was 20 minutes late, which was the first time she'd been late for anything. He registered it and said nothing when she came in, setting down her bag with a deliberateness that telegraphed the effort she was expending on her composure. Her face was controlled. Her eyes were not. He'd seen that combination before. On soldiers, on people who'd just been told something that had rearranged their interior landscape, on anyone who'd had significant practice maintaining a surface while something underneath was moving fast and hard. "Morning sequence," she said. "Zarya, morning sequence," she said again, firmer. "Unless you want to skip it." He didn't push. He knew the difference between someone who needed to talk and someone who needed to work, and she needed to work. Needed to put her hands on something concrete and controllable in the middle of all the things she couldn't control. He understood that specifically. It was the same thing he'd been doing for 3 weeks. They went through the sequence. She was precise and efficient and slightly harder on him than usual, which he also recognized, the excess pressure bleeding out through legitimate channels. He did everything she asked without complaint and without looking at her face, because she didn't want to be looked at right now, and he wasn't going to do it. 40 minutes in, during the resistance band work, she said without looking up, "She said she knows my background. What does that mean to you?" "It means she or someone working for her ran your name," Jaemin said. "They found something they thought they could use. And did they?" He looked at her then. She was still focused on guiding the resistance band, her jaw set, her hand steady. "Does it matter?" he said. "What they think they found?" "It might matter in a courtroom," she said. "What is it?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, 5 years ago, I had a situation with a previous patient. She said the word situation carefully, the way you say a word when you've said it many times to yourself before and have decided it's the right word and you're committing to it. He was elderly, wealthy. He changed his will while I was caring for him, increased his estate's charitable distribution, and reduced his family's inheritance. His family contested it after he died. They claimed I'd influenced him. "Had you?" Her eyes came up to his. "I talked to him," she said. "He told me his family hadn't visited in 3 years. He asked me what I thought about giving money to people who hadn't earned it. I told him I thought people should be able to do what they wanted with what they'd built." She paused. "That's all I did. The family's lawsuit was dismissed, but it's in the record, and it looks—" She stopped. "It looks like a pattern. 2 wealthy patients, allegations of influence. It looks like something it isn't." He held her gaze. "I know," he said. "You don't know me," she said. Not aggressive, careful. "You've known me 3 weeks. I know what I've watched you do for 3 weeks," he said. "I know what it looks like when someone is actually doing something versus performing it." He paused. "I've been in rooms with people who perform their whole lives. You don't perform." Something shifted in her expression. A small, involuntary thing, like a muscle she'd been holding released slightly. "That's not going to hold up in depositions," she said. "No," he agreed. "We'll find something that does." Yeah. Hannah arrived by noon. She came with a paralegal named Steve, who said nothing and took notes, and she spread documents across the table in Jamin's room with the focused energy of someone who had been working since 5 a.m. and had reached the phase of the day where efficiency was the only option. "Warren Chu filed an amendment to the conservatorship petition this morning," she said. "They're now including what they're calling evidence of an inappropriate caregiver relationship as additional grounds for incompetency. The interview was coordinated with the filing. They planned this." "I know," Jamin said. "It's going to get worse before the hearing. They're going to try to make Zarya the story, turn the narrative from vengeful wife to vulnerable patient exploited by manipulative caregiver. It shifts public sympathy, complicates the asset fraud angle. And what do you need from me?" Jamin said. Hannah looked at him over her reading glasses. "I need 2 things. First, the financial records. Everything you can give me that documents Serafina's transfers, the Morella account, the timeline. I need it admissible, which means sourced and documented, not obtained through channels that will blow up in our faces." "I have that." "Second, I need you to understand that if we're going to fight the conservatorship claim, we need to demonstrate that you are functional, capable, and not under anyone's undue influence, which means Zarya's situation becomes a liability we need to manage carefully." He was quiet for a moment. "She stays," he said. "Jamin?" "She stays," he said again. Same tone, the one that meant the discussion had ended before it started. "We find another way." Hannah looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Steve, who was writing something on his notepad and very professionally not registering this exchange. "Okay," she said, with the particular controlled patience of someone choosing their battles. "Then I need everything you have on Kevin Tran. The skimming evidence, the termination, anything that documents his motivation for testifying against you. I'll send it tonight. And I need—" Hannah paused, shuffled to a different page. "I need you to tell me about Detective Marcus Webb." Jamin's expression didn't change. "What about him?" he said. "Our investigator found a connection. Webb has a brother-in-law in commercial property development. That brother-in-law has a business relationship with a holding company that has, at 3 degrees of separation, a partial interest in one of Serafina's post-separation accounts." The room was quiet. Steve wrote something. 3 degrees, Jamin said. "It's not clean," Hannah said, "but it's a thread. If we pull it carefully and it holds, it gives us grounds to challenge the traffic division reassignment. It potentially reopens the brake line question." She took her glasses off. "But Jamin, this is a serious allegation. If we raise it and it falls apart, the blowback is significant." "Pull the thread," Jamin said. "Carefully, Titan." After Hannah left, the afternoon stretched long and loud with things nobody was saying. Jae-min made his calls, Tyo. Park first, who was guarded and vague in a way that confirmed what Jae-min already knew, which was that Dae-hyun had gotten further than he'd initially let on. Then Cho, who was more forthcoming and whose information filled in gaps with the specific, uncomfortable clarity of a picture coming into focus that you'd preferred blurred. Dae-hyun hadn't just had dinner with Park and Shin. He'd made offers. Concrete ones. Restructured percentages, operational autonomy, promises of access that Jae-min had always withheld for reasons of structural stability. He'd positioned himself not as a temporary manager, but as a long-term alternative. He'd done it while Jae-min was unconscious and unable to counter, and he'd done it quickly enough that the offer had had 3 weeks to sit and marinate in the minds of men who were now watching their boss run his empire from a wheelchair in a rehabilitation facility. Loyalty was always conditional. Jae-min had always known that. It was one of the foundational operating principles of his entire career. Loyalty without consequence was preference, and preference shifted with circumstance. He'd built systems designed to make disloyalty expensive enough that it wasn't worth the risk. Those systems relied on his presence. He was not present. He set the phone down and looked at the ceiling the way he'd been looking at the hospital ceiling 3 weeks ago. And he permitted himself exactly 90 seconds of something that was adjacent to despair, the cold, pressurized feeling of watching the walls of a room shrink toward you. And then he put it away and started thinking practically. He needed to be visible, not physically. He couldn't manage physical yet, but perceptible. He needed Park and Shin and anyone else who was wavering to feel the weight of his attention, to receive information about the specific content of their recent conversations in ways that made clear those conversations had not been as private as they'd believed. He needed Dae-hyun to understand that distance had not produced ignorance. He picked up the phone again. Zarya came back at 6. She looked somewhat more settled than she had in the morning. Not resolved, but reordered. Like she'd spent the intervening hours doing the internal work of putting things into the compartments where they could be managed. "How are your calls going?" she said, beginning to set up. "Productive," he said. "That's not an answer." "It's the answer I have." She glanced at him sideways, not annoyed, assessing. She did this regularly, these sidelong calibrations, reading something in his posture or his voice that she used to adjust her approach. He'd started noticing it in the second week and had found himself uncomfortably performing more honestly than he meant to. When he was in pain, she seemed to know without being told. When he was angry, she registered it before he'd said anything and adjusted the session's intensity accordingly. He wasn't sure how to account for this. "You need to call your physical therapist about the left hip," she said. "The rotation issue is getting worse, not better. Something in the sequence isn't working." "Your sequence?" "Yes. Which is why I'm the one telling you to change it." She said it without defensiveness, which was one of the things about her that consistently surprised him. Most people, told they might have been wrong about something, defended themselves first and then considered the evidence. Zarya moved directly to the evidence. "I think we need to start incorporating aquatic therapy. The resistance pattern is different and it might—" "You can't swim," he said. She stopped, looked at him. "The pool facility here," he said. "You have a note in your file that you can't supervise in the pool environment without a secondary certified water safety presence. I read your personnel file." The air in the room changed. "You read my personnel file?" she said. "Yes." "When?" "Day 4. She set down what she was holding with a small, deliberate click. "And what else did you find?" "The previous patient," he said. "The lawsuit. Your education history. 3 years at a community college before the nursing certification. A previous employer, a hospital in Inglewood, that gave you a strong recommendation after a work environment complaint you filed." He paused. "The complaint was against a supervisor. You won." She was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. Not angry. He'd seen her angry, brief, and controlled. This was something else, colder and more personal. "You did that in 4 days," she said. "I do that with everyone I'm in a room with for extended periods," he said. "It's how I work. It's not—" He stopped. Tried again. "I wasn't looking for something to use. I was looking for who you were." "And did you find out?" "Some of it." She picked up what she'd set down. Her hands were steady. "You could have asked me," she said. I don't ask people about themselves when I can find out other ways, he said. Other ways are more reliable. Other ways don't leave room for what people tell you themselves, which is usually the most important part. She moved to his left side and began the preliminary positioning for the hip rotation work. Her hands were professional and precise, and she was not looking at his face. You want to know something real about me, Jamin? Ask me a question. He was quiet for a moment. The scar, he said. Your wrist. Her hands paused for exactly 1 second, then continued. That's not a question, she said. What happened? She worked through the first rotation without answering, her focus on the movement, her breathing steady. He waited. He was a patient man when the situation required it. 7 years ago, she said, finally. Quiet. Not the prepared version of a story, the real version, the one that came out without structure. I was in a place I'm not in anymore. I was with someone I shouldn't have been with for longer than I should have been, and one night I made a choice that... She stopped. I survived it, obviously, and I spent about 2 years after that figuring out what to do with the surviving. She looked at him briefly. That's the short version. What's the long version? The long version takes longer than 6 o'clock sessions. She adjusted the angle of his hip. Press here. Hold for 8. He pressed. They worked through the sequence in something that wasn't quite silence. It had texture to it. That particular weight of two people who had just said something real to each other and were processing what it cost them. Cool. The text from Hannah came at 9:45 p.m. Check the news. It's gotten worse. He checked. The entertainment blog had published a follow-up piece. Someone, and he already knew who, because there were only so many people with access to the specific details being cited, had given them information about Zaria's previous case. The lawsuit, the dismissed complaint. They'd framed it as a pattern of targeting wealthy, vulnerable patients, and they had included a photo of Zaria that someone had taken outside Meridian, arriving for her shift. Candid. She hadn't known she was being photographed. The comments were already several hundred deep. He scrolled through a few of them before stopping. They were the kind of comments that built themselves on the architecture of someone else's bad framing, each one amplifying the last, each one carrying the specific ugliness that anonymity produced. He put the phone down. He picked it up again. He called Hannah. How did they get the file information? He said. I don't know yet, Hannah said. Her voice was tired in a way that suggested she'd been awake since the morning and it was catching up. It could be someone in Warren Chu's firm. It could be someone at Meridian. Someone accessed her personnel records and fed the information out. My room, Jamin said. I told her I'd read her personnel file today. Jamin, someone has access to my room, a recording device, or... He stopped. The cold clarity was back. Or someone on the staff is feeding information out. That's a significant accusation. Yes. Do you have reason to believe... I told her something private today. That specific piece of information appeared in an article within 4 hours. He was already thinking through it. The room, the people who'd been in it, Hannah and Steve, the maintenance worker visible from the window, the staff who came and went. Find out who on the Meridian staff has a connection to Warren Chu's firm, to Serafina's circle, to anyone in Daehyun's recent contact list. Hannah was quiet for a moment. I'll start tonight. He hung up. He sat in the dark for a while, turning over the shape of the day. The interview. The amended filing. The article. The photo of Zaria outside the building, taken without her knowledge. Whoever was doing this was organized and patient and had resources. This was not improvised. This was a campaign. He needed to talk to Zaria. He needed to warn her about the article. He needed to tell her that someone in the building might be monitoring his room. He called her cell. It rang 6 times. She didn't pick up. He texted, "Call me when you can." No response. He set the phone down and looked at the window and thought about the photo. Taken outside, from somewhere across the lot, with enough resolution to make her face clear. Someone had been watching. Someone had positioned themselves and waited and captured her arriving for her shift, and they'd done it with the particular calculated purpose of someone who intended to publish it next to accusations designed to follow a woman for the rest of her career. He thought about what she'd said. This kind of thing follows people. He thought about her face in the morning, controlled and not quite holding it. He thought about 7 years ago and a scar on a wrist and a real version of a story. His phone lit up. Not Zarya. Hana. Found something. Call me. He called. The maintenance subcontractor working in the garden this morning, Hana said. The irrigation work. His company. Small operation, 2-man crew, did a job 3 months ago at a property in Malibu. The property is registered to a shell company. The shell company has one listed director. Jaemin already knew before she said it. Serafina, he said. Her maiden name, Serafina Valensky. She's been using it for the shell company since before you married. Hana paused. He wasn't here to fix the irrigation, Jaemin. He was here to plant something. The room suddenly felt different. He looked around it, at the walls, the ceiling fixtures, the ventilation grate above the door, the smoke detector. Any of them could hold something small enough to be invisible in a routine glance. Any of them could have been accessible to a man spending several hours in the garden outside his window. I need a sweep, he said. I'll have someone there by morning. Tonight, he said. Jaemin, it's 10 p.m. Tonight, Hana. A pause. Okay, she said. Tonight. He hung up and sat very still, not because stillness was required, but because he was running through every conversation he'd had in this room since the beginning. With Hana, with Dai, Hyun, with Cho, with Park. Everything he'd said about the investigation, about the break lines, about Serafina's transfers and the Morella account and Detective Webb. And the conversation with Zarya, about her scar, about 7 years ago. That conversation, intimate and unguarded in a way that almost nothing else in his life currently was, had been recorded by someone working for the woman who was trying to take everything from him. He didn't permit himself the anger yet. He put it where he kept things he needed to use later, in the careful interior space he'd built over a lifetime of choosing when to spend his energy, and he took a slow breath and thought about what came next. The door of his room opened. He turned. Zarya stood in the doorway. She was in street clothes, jeans, a gray jacket, which meant she'd come back after her shift ended, not during it. Her face was tight, and she was holding her phone, and he could see from across the room that the screen showed the article. They used my photo, she said. I know. They went to where I work, she said. They stood outside and they waited for me and they took my picture and they put it next to... She stopped. Her jaw worked. They didn't even spell my last name right. He wanted to say something that was adequate to this. He didn't have it. Come in, he said. Close the door. She came in. She didn't close the door all the way. Left it open an inch, which he clocked and didn't comment on. There may be a recording device in this room, he said. I have someone coming to check tonight. I need you to know that the conversation we had today about your scar, about the previous patient, may have been heard. She absorbed this. By who? She said. By whoever Serafina has working here. She looked around the room. Her eyes moved carefully, the way someone's eyes move when they're recalibrating a space they thought they understood. The maintenance guy, she said. This morning. He looked at her. I noticed him, she said. He was there for 2 hours. Irrigation systems don't take 2 hours on a section that size. She paused. I should have said something. You couldn't have known. I notice things, she said, quietly, specifically, like it was both a claim and a judgment against herself. That's my job. I should have... Zarya. He waited until she looked at him. This is not your fault. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she sat down in the chair across from him. The same chair she'd sat in when she'd told him about Dae-hyun, the first time she'd crossed from caregiver into whatever this was becoming, and she put her hands on her knees and looked at the floor. I've worked really hard, she said, to not be in situations like this again, to not be the person in the story that other people are telling. She exhaled. I'm careful. I'm so careful. I know. You don't know. I've watched you be careful for 3 weeks, he said. Every decision, every line. I've watched you. He stopped. And it's not going to be enough, because the people doing this don't care how careful you've been. They care about what your name looks like next to certain words. She looked up. So what do we do? She said. He had been building toward an answer to this question since 7:45 in the morning, and now it settled into place with the particular cold satisfaction of a plan that was simple enough to execute and ugly enough to actually work. "We stop defending," he said. "We start talking." Talking. "I have 4.2 million reasons, a Nevada shell company, and 11 months of transfer records that tell a story nobody has heard yet." He looked at her steadily. "And I'm done waiting for a courtroom to be the place where I tell it." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's going to blow everything up," she said. "Yes," he said, "including things you can't put back together. Some things don't deserve to be put back together." The inch of open door let in a thin line of corridor light. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang twice and stopped. The garden outside was dark and still, the jasmine invisible, the bench a pale shape against the fence. Zarya looked at him with an expression that was not agreement and not disagreement. It was the expression of someone standing at the edge of something and deciding whether to step. "Okay," she said, and then her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Something in her face shifted, a quick involuntary tightening that he caught before she controlled it. "Who is it?" he said. She turned the screen toward him. The name read, Marcus Webb, LAPD, the detective who had closed the investigation, calling Zarya Brooks at 10:37 p.m. He said. She answered it on speaker, her eyes on Jaemin's face, and the detective's voice filled the quiet room with something that landed between the two of them like a stone through glass. 3 sentences, flat and fast, that made the temperature of everything change. Jaemin had been wrong about one thing. He'd thought the people trying to destroy him had made a mistake by underestimating him. What he hadn't accounted for was that they weren't trying to destroy him at all. They were trying to use him. And the thing they were planning to use him for was already... Webb's voice was flat and unhurried, the voice of a man who had rehearsed what he was going to say enough times that the rehearsal had worn the emotion out of it. "Ms. Brooks, I'm calling because there's information relevant to you that you need to hear before it becomes public. I'd strongly recommend you listen without interrupting." Zarya's eyes were on Jaemin. He gave her a single, small nod. "I'm listening," she said. 3 days ago, a warrant was issued for financial records related to the Kong estate. In the course of that review, investigators identified a series of transfers originating from an account associated with your name, a personal savings account at Pacific Federal, routing number ending in 4471. 14 transfers over 8 months, total amount, $237,000. The room went absolutely still. Zarya's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Ms. Brooks, I'm advising you as a courtesy, not in any official capacity, that this information has been shared with Warren Chu's legal team and will be introduced in the conservatorship hearing as evidence of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. You have approximately..." "That account doesn't exist," Zarya said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, that account does not exist." Louder now. Not shouting. Controlled, but the control was thin. "I don't have an account at Pacific Federal. I've never banked there. Whoever told you that account belongs to me is lying." A pause on Webb's end. Measured. Too measured. "The account was opened 14 months ago," Webb said. "The identification used was a California driver's license bearing your name, your date of birth, and your home address." "Someone used my identity," Zarya said. "That's one interpretation. That's the only interpretation that's true." "Ms. Brooks," Webb's voice shifted slightly. Still flat, but with something underneath it now, something that sounded almost like discomfort. "I'm not here to argue the merits. I'm calling because..." He stopped. Started again. "I'm calling because what happens next is going to move fast, and you should know it's coming." He hung up. The silence that followed had weight to it. Actual, physical weight, the kind that pressed down on the shoulders and made breathing slightly harder than it should have been. Zarya stood up. She put her phone in her pocket and walked to the window and stood with her back to Jaemin, her hands at her sides, looking at the dark garden. Her shoulders rose and fell once. Twice. "Someone opened an account in my name," she said. "Yes." "And put $237,000 in it." "Yes. While I was working here, while I was..." She stopped. "They planned this before I even took this job." Jaemin's mind was already moving,
already pulling threads. The timing. 14 months ago, before his accident, before Serafina filed, before any of it became visible. 14 months ago, someone had anticipated that Zaria Brooks would become a figure in this story and had built a financial crime in her name before she'd even entered the room.
Which meant one of two things. Either Serafina had known, somehow, who Meridian would assign to him, which required an inside connection to the facility going back over a year, or the account had been built as a general weapon, a floating piece of ammunition designed to be aimed at whoever became relevant. Neither option was comforting. "They didn't plan for you specifically," he said. "They planned for whoever was closest to me." She turned. Her face had moved past the controlled tightness of the morning and was somewhere rawer now. Not broken, but stripped of the outer layer, the professional remove she carried like armor. "It doesn't matter," she said. My name is on it. My ID was used. Whatever story they tell, I'm the one who has to prove it isn't true." She looked at him. "And proving a negative to people who don't want to believe you is—" She shook her head. "I've done that before. It doesn't go the way you think it will." He looked at her. "I know it doesn't," he said. "Then what do we do with this? What does your plan look like now?" He didn't answer immediately, because the plan he'd had 40 minutes ago had just been outflanked, and he needed to think through what remained of it. They'd moved on Zaria before he could move on Serafina. They'd taken his most credible ally, the one person whose visible proximity to him was grounded in professional legitimacy, and they'd turned her into a liability. It was clean, methodical, the kind of move that required patience and coordination, and most importantly, foreknowledge of exactly what he was planning to do. He thought about the recording device. He thought about every conversation in this room. He thought about who else had been listening. Hannah arrived at 11:30 with a man named Felix, who carried a black equipment case and spoke only to confirm that yes, he'd found something, and yes, it was exactly what they'd suspected. The device was embedded in the smoke detector housing above the door, small, passive, activated by sound, capable of transmitting continuously to a receiver within a half-mile radius. Felix dropped it in a glass of water on the tray table. Hannah looked at Jamin. "How long?" he said. Felix checked something on his phone. "Based on the model, these have about a 60-day battery, so somewhere between 2 weeks and 2 months. 2 months. Everything. Every call. Every conversation with Cho, with Park, with Shin. The conversation with Dae-hyun. Everything with Hannah. Everything with Zaria. Every card he held had been visible to the other side." He looked at the device in the glass of water. Small, unremarkable, worth approximately $40 at any electronics retailer, and felt something move through him that wasn't quite rage and wasn't quite despair, but lived in the territory between them. The specific devastation of realizing that the game you thought you were playing was not the game being played. "Get out," he said to Felix, quietly. The man got out. Hannah stood. "The transfers into Zaria's fabricated account," Jamin said. "Where did the money come from?" Hannah pulled her tablet. "I've been looking at that since your text. The source account is flagged in our records. It's a secondary operational account associated with the Incheon connection, the one Park controls." He went very still. "Park funded it," he said. "The transfers originated from that account," Hannah said carefully. "That doesn't necessarily mean—" "Park funded the account," he said again. Hannah looked at him. "Park has been working with Dae-hyun," she said, quietly, not telling him something he didn't know, confirming something he was just now understanding the full shape of. "They used an account you don't regularly audit. They moved money out of your own operation to build a case against a woman you hadn't even met yet, which means—" "Dae-hyun knew about Serafina's plan," Jamin said. "He didn't just opportunistically move in after the accident. He was part of it before." The room was very quiet. Zaria was sitting in the chair by the window, arms crossed over her chest, watching him. Her face was the face of someone listening to a story that keeps getting worse and has decided to hear all of it before reacting. "Your brother," she said, "and your wife." "Yes." "Together." "Yes." She looked at the glass of water with the device in it. "How long?" she said. "I don't know, Sag," he said. "But long enough to plan the accident, long enough to build the financial structure, long enough to make sure that when I woke up, everything was already in motion. Zarya uncrossed her arms, put her hands flat on her knees, pressed down like she was steadying herself. The accident wasn't Serafina acting alone, she said. No. Your brother wanted you dead. The word dead sat between them like something spilled. Or incapacitated, Jamin said. Dead is harder to control. Incapacitated means you still have an estate, an empire, things worth taking, if you have the right legal framework and the right judges and the right people testifying about mental incompetence. The conservatorship, Zarya said. If Serafina gets control of my assets through the incompetency ruling, she has what she wants. If Daehyun positions himself as the operational head of the organization while I'm legally incapacitated, he stopped. They split it. She takes the legitimate money. He takes the operation. And I sit in this wheelchair and watch it happen because every move I make has been anticipated and every person I trusted has been compromised. Hana sat down slowly in the chair across from him. She set her tablet on the table. She took off her glasses. This is a RICO-level conspiracy, she said. If we can prove this, we can't prove it in 3 weeks, Jamin said. Not in time for the hearing. No, she agreed. And if we raise it at the hearing without proof, it looks like paranoid deflection from a man claiming he's mentally competent. Yes. So we're back to the same position we were in this morning, he said. Except now Zarya has a fabricated fraud case attached to her name. Our opposition has heard every strategy conversation we've had in this room for potentially 2 months, and my brother is more deeply embedded in this than I knew. Hana said nothing. There was nothing useful to say. Who else? Jamin said. Excuse me? Who else has been turned? You know the answer. I can see it. Tell me. Hana picked her glasses back up. Put them on. A small, unnecessary action. She did it when she was buying herself a second. Shin, she said. He signed a declaration. It was filed this afternoon after the interview aired. He's corroborating the mental instability claim. He says he witnessed you, and I'm reading directly, exhibiting paranoid and violent behavior consistent with someone incapable of rational decision-making in the 18 months prior to the accident. Shin. He'd known Shin for 11 years, had eaten at the man's table, had attended his eldest daughter's wedding 4 years ago in a small venue in Glendale with paper lanterns and 2 sweet wedding cake and a speech from the father of the bride that had gone on for 23 minutes and made 3 women cry. He's lying, Jamin said. I know he is, Hana said. He'll say it under oath. I believe he will, yes. Jamin looked at the window. Dark garden, dark sky. The jasmine vine was just a pale outline, the way things were when the light source was taken away and you were left with shapes and the memory of colors. He had one financial attorney who was still loyal, one operational contact who was still reporting to him, and a caregiver who had just had her identity stolen and her career threatened and who was sitting 4 feet away from him watching his empire dissolve in real time. These were his resources. He looked at Zarya. She was looking back at him with an expression that he found, in that moment, more useful than anything else in the room. Not pity, not fear. Something harder and more forward-facing than either of those. The expression of someone who had already been through the worst version of a situation like this and survived it, and was now applying what that experience had cost her. You said you wanted to talk, she said. Stop defending, start talking. I want to hear that plan again. The plan was built on the assumption that the opposition didn't know what I was going to do, he said. So change the plan, she said. Not the direction, the plan. They've heard everything. Then say something new. She leaned forward slightly. They've been listening to Jae-min Kang, the crime boss, try to fight like a crime boss. Strategic calls, legal maneuvering, closed-door conversations. She held his gaze. They're not prepared for Jae-min Kang to just tell people what happened. Not through a lawyer, not through a statement, you, on camera, the whole thing. That's dangerous, she said. Yes. Also, it's the only move left that they haven't already heard and countered. He looked at her. You'd be part of it, he said. If I go on camera, the story includes you, the fabricated account, your name. My name is already out there, she said. They've already made me part of the story. I'd rather be part of the true version. Achat. He made the call to Cho at midnight. Not about the operation, not about Park or Shin or Daehyun's promises.
He called Cho because Cho was the one person who'd come to him voluntarily, whose information had been clean and unmanipulated, who'd picked up every call. "I need something from you," Jaemin said. "Name it," Cho said. "I need you to do nothing. For the next 72 hours, no contact with Daehyun, no response to Park, no movement on anything operational. Disappear."
A pause. "They'll notice."
"Let them notice." "What are you doing?" Cho said. "Something I should have done 3 weeks ago," Jaemin said. "Stay quiet. Stay safe." He hung up and looked at the ceiling and thought about what came next with the particular focused clarity that arrived. Sometimes, when you'd lost enough that the fear of losing more stopped being paralyzing. There was something almost clean about having nothing left to protect.
The morning brought complications of a different kind. Dr. Osei arrived from the hospital. Not her scheduled visit, she'd driven from LA specifically, and sat across from him with a folder and the expression that meant she had arranged her face to deliver information he wasn't going to like. "The conservatorship team has requested an independent neurological assessment," she said. "That's standard when mental competency is at issue. However, the evaluator they've selected—" "Clayton Reeves," Jaemin said. She paused. "You know his name. He signed off on 4 prior evaluations for Warren Chu's firm. He's never met a patient he didn't find incompetent." Dr. Osei looked at him steadily. "I filed an objection to his selection on the grounds of demonstrated conflict of interest. But Jaemin, the hearing is in less than 3 weeks. The court may not have time to appoint a neutral evaluator before the date. Which means Reeves does the evaluation," he said.
"Unless the date is pushed." "I don't want the date pushed." He said it with enough quiet force that she didn't argue it. "Can you testify? As my treating physician, can you put on record that I am neurologically sound?" "I can testify to what I've observed clinically," she said. "But I'm a spinal specialist, not a psychiatrist. Reeves will challenge my scope."
"Then testify to scope," he said. "Testify that the questions they're asking are outside the domain of spinal injury, that you've observed nothing in my cognition, my decision-making, my communication that suggests any neurological impairment." He looked at her. "Can you say that truthfully?" She held his gaze. "Yes," she said. "I can say that truthfully." "Then that's what I need." She left. He sat with the residue of the conversation, the hearing date, the evaluator, the cascading problems that each day seemed to add to rather than subtract from. And he did something he hadn't done since the accident. He took deliberate stock. What did he have? He had Hana. He had Dr. Osei's testimony. He had the financial records, the Morella account, the 11 months of transfers, the documentation Hana had been assembling. He had the device pulled from the smoke detector, which was evidence of surveillance that could be tied with the right investigative work, to the maintenance contractor tied to Serafina's shell company. He had Cho. And he had what Zarya had said the night before. Say something new. What he didn't have was time, and he didn't have the kind of evidence that won courtrooms cleanly. What he had was a story, true, documented, ugly in the specific way that true stories about betrayal were ugly, and a platform he hadn't used yet. He asked Zarya to come in. She arrived for the morning session and he told her what he was planning, the full version. Not the strategic outline, but the actual mechanics, the format, the content, the timing, what it would require from her. He told her in the same flat, information-forward way she told him things, without softening the risks. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You'd be releasing everything," she said. "The transfers, the shell company, the accident investigation, your brother." "Yes." "That's going to create problems for you beyond the courtroom. The people you work with, your operation." "The operation is already compromised," he said. "Park is funding frame jobs. Shin is signing declarations. Daehyun is running promises through the network." He paused. "There's nothing left to protect there that isn't already being dismantled from the inside." She looked at him. "You're walking away from it," she said. He didn't answer immediately. "I'm choosing what I want to fight for," he said. "And it's not what it was." She held his gaze for a long moment. Something in her face did the thing it sometimes did, the small, unguarded shift that happened when she caught herself feeling something she hadn't prepared for. "Okay," she said. "What do you need from me?" "Your story," he said. "The real one. The previous patient, the lawsuit, the fabricated account. On camera, in your own words. That's asking a lot. I know. It's asking me to make myself the story. You're already the story, he said. I'm asking you to be the true version of it. She looked at the window. Morning light now, genuine and flat, the jasmine just visible against the fence. All right, she said. Pummet. The video went up at 6 p.m. the following day. Jamin had recorded it in his room, the room with the now empty smoke detector housing, deliberately framed in the shot as a reminder of its own absence. He sat in his wheelchair and he looked at the camera that Hana's associate was holding, and he spoke for 22 minutes without notes and without a lawyer's framing. He said everything. The marriage, the transfers, the Morella account, the accident and the brake lines and the investigation that had gone to traffic division, Detective Webb and the shell company and the maintenance contractor and the device, Dae-hyun and the dinners and the promises to Park and Shin, the declaration Shin had signed, the fabricated account in Zarya's name, the photo taken outside the building, the interview, the way the pieces fit together into a shape that had been assembled over 14 months by people who had been close enough to him to understand exactly where the pressure points were. He said it in plain language. He didn't perform. He didn't cry. He sat in his wheelchair and he talked about his own life with the flat, unembellished specificity of a man who had decided that performance was the first thing he was willing to give up. Zarya's segment was 4 minutes. She sat beside him, not touching, not staged, and she told her version. The previous patient, the dismissed lawsuit, the call from Webb, the account with her name on it that she had never opened. She didn't perform either. The video had 300,000 views by midnight. By the following morning, it had 2.7 million. By the time Hana called at 7 a.m. the morning after that, something else had happened. Something that changed the shape of everything again, and not in the direction anyone had anticipated. Webb called me, Hana said. Her voice had an unusual quality. Not controlled, not the managed efficiency of a woman who had been delivering bad news professionally for 20 years. Something rawer. He wants to meet. He says he has documentation he didn't include in the official investigation file. He says... She stopped. He says he was told the file would be reviewed by someone who would make sure his brother-in-law's development permits went through without complication. He says he didn't know about the accident being deliberate. He says when the video went up... She stopped again. Jamin. He says when the video went up and he started getting calls from journalists, he went back through his own records and he found something. Jamin's hand tightened on the phone. What did he find? He said. Hana exhaled. A second vehicle, she said, parked 3 blocks from the accident site. Traffic camera footage that was never entered into evidence. A partial plate that... She paused. Jamin. The partial plate matches a vehicle registered to a holding company. I've been running the registration chain for the last hour. He already knew. Dae-hyun, he said. His wife's maiden name, Hana said. Used to register the holding company. Same structure as Serafina's shell. Same playbook. Her voice was very quiet now. He was there. The night of the accident. He was there. The morning light came through the window. The jasmine moved slightly against the fence in a wind too gentle to feel. Jamin sat with the phone pressed against his ear and felt something happen inside his chest. A slow, tectonic movement. The kind of shift that didn't announce itself but was irreversible once it started. 20 years of building, protecting, controlling. 20 years of knowing exactly what the rules were and who played by them, and what loyalty cost and what it bought. His brother had been 3 blocks away, had watched the car go, had driven home, had called 2 days later with a suit that cost too much and an expression that was trying to be concerned. The phone was heavy in his hand. Set the meeting with Webb, Jamin said. When? Today, he said. Now. Wherever he wants. Jamin. Hana. He stopped, took a breath, let it out slowly. Set the meeting. He hung up. He sat in the quiet of the room for a long time, long enough that when Zarya knocked, properly, the way she'd promised, and came in for the morning session, she took one look at his face and didn't ask. She set her bag down. She pulled her chair close, closer than she usually positioned it, close enough that he could hear her breathing, and she sat down and waited. He told her about Dai Hyun. Not all of it. The part that mattered. 3 blocks away. Traffic camera. The partial plate. His brother, parked in the dark, watching the car go. Zarya listened without moving. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her hands flat on her knees, her jaw set. "When's the meeting with Webb?" she said. 2 hours. "Where?" "Hana's office." She nodded, stood, picked up her bag. "I'm coming," she said. He looked at her. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." She looked back at him with the particular steadiness she had. The kind that wasn't calm exactly, more like a decision that had already been made and didn't need revisiting. "I'm coming." He didn't argue. Webb was already in Hana's conference room when they arrived. He was a man in his mid-50s, heavy-set, with the particular posture of someone who had been carrying something uncomfortable for long enough that it had started reshaping his spine. He sat at the far end of the table with a manila folder in front of him and his hands folded on top of it, and he didn't look up immediately when they came in. When he did look up, his eyes went to Jae-min first, the wheelchair, then the face, and something in his expression did a complicated thing that landed somewhere between guilt and the defensive anger that guilt produced in certain types of men. Hana sat at the head of the table. Zarya took the chair beside Jae-min. Nobody introduced anyone. They all knew who everyone was. "You said you had documentation," Hana said. Webb pushed the folder across the table. Hana opened it. Jae-min watched her face. "Your traffic camera pulls from the intersection of Arroyo and 5th, Webb said. "Timestamp puts the vehicle at the location 11 minutes before the accident. Partial plate. Lima, Romeo, 4, possibly 5 or 6, so registered as I told you." He exhaled through his nose. "I pulled this footage on the night of the accident. It was in my working file. When the case was reassigned to Traffic Division, this file was supposed to transfer with the case. It didn't transfer. I kept the physical copy without documenting it." "Why?" Jae-min said. Webb looked at him. "Because I was told the case was being handled," Webb said. "I was told by someone I trusted, someone above my grade, that there was an active investigation through a different channel, and that the Traffic Division reassignment was a cover to protect the integrity of that investigation." "And you believe that," Jae-min said. The flatness in his voice made Webb's jaw tighten. "I was given reasons to believe it," Webb said, "and I was given other reasons to not ask questions." "Your brother-in-law's permits." A beat. "Yes," Webb said. Jae-min looked at the folder. "The video," Webb said. "When it went up, my daughter called me. She'd watched it. She's 23. He stopped. His hands tightened on each other. "She called me and she said, Dad, is any of that true?" And He stopped again. Nobody filled the silence. He didn't deserve help filling it. "I went back through my records," he said. "I found the footage. I found 3 other things that were excluded from the transfer file, including a partial fingerprint from the vehicle's brake assembly that was never run through AFIS. Hana looked up sharply. "Why was it never run?" she said. "I was told it was degraded. Unusable." Webb's voice was careful now. "It's not degraded. I've looked at it. It's partial, but it's runnable. I should have pushed harder. I didn't." The room was very quiet. "I'm prepared to go on record," Webb said. "Full statement. Everything I've told you here, documented and sworn. In exchange," he looked at Hana. "In exchange, I need some assurance that the permits question doesn't become a criminal matter for my brother-in-law. The permits were obtained legally. The conversation I had about them was implicit, not explicit. No money changed hands, no direct promise was made." "I'm not a prosecutor," Hana said. "No," Webb said. "But you have ears, and you know people. I need to know that what I'm giving you is used for the hearing, for the investigation, and that the brother-in-law's name stays out of the filing." Hana looked at Jae-min. Jae-min looked at Webb. "Run the print," Jae-min said, "and submit the footage to the DA's office directly. Not through Warren Chu, not through the hearing, directly to the DA. If the print comes back with a result before the hearing date, you give that result to Hana. The permits question," he paused, "stays in the room." Webb looked at him for a long moment. "You have my word," Jae-min said, flat, like a signature. Webb picked up his folder and stood. He looked at Zarya before he left. A brief look. Something that might have been an apology if he'd known how to shape it. And then he left, and Hana closed the door, and the three of them sat in the aftermath. The print could take 72 hours, Hana said. The hearing is in 9 days. I know, Jaemin said. And even with the footage and the print, what we have is evidence that Dae-hyun was present at the scene. It's not a conviction, Jaemin said. I know, but it's enough to introduce to the hearing as grounds for the investigation to be reopened. It shifts the frame. It puts Dae-hyun in the story publicly. He paused. And once it's public, the people who've been making promises to Park and Shin are going to recalibrate their positions very fast. Hana thought about this. There's still the fabricated account, she said. Zarya's situation. I have someone looking at Pacific Federal's account opening records, Zarya said. Both of them looked at her. She'd been quiet through the meeting, and her voice coming in now had a quality of someone who had been doing their own thinking. My cousin works in financial compliance, not at Pacific Federal, at another institution, but she knows the process. The ID verification for account opening has a digital fingerprint. If someone used a copy of my license, the image file will have metadata, date created, device used, software version. She can tell us whether the image was original or copied and digitally modified. Hana was already writing. If we can show the ID was fabricated, Hana started. Then the account was opened through identity theft, Zarya said, which is a separate crime, which can be investigated independently of the hearing. She paused. My cousin is looking at it tonight. Jaemin looked at her. She looked back at him without expression, but there was something in her eyes. The same thing that had been building there for weeks. The specific warmth of a person who had decided to be fully present in a situation rather than at a managed distance. And he held it for a moment before looking back at the table. 9 days, he said. 9 days, Hana confirmed. But the next 72 hours moved the way time moved before the worst things. Simultaneously slow and violent, each hour longer than it should have been, and over faster than you expected. The video kept climbing. 4 million views, then 6. Then a journalist from a national outlet called Hana's office, requesting an interview. Then 2 more. The comments had shifted in character. Early on, they'd been split, the way things on the internet split between those who wanted to believe the powerful man was the villain and those who wanted to believe the woman was. But as the view count climbed and the documentation in the video's attached links got read and shared and read again, the split had tilted, not universally, not cleanly. But the weight of the evidence in the video, the specific, documentable, cross-referenceable nature of what Jaemin had laid out, was doing something that raw emotional appeal never quite managed on its own. It was making people think. Serafina's team issued a statement. It called the video a desperate fabrication and announced that it would be addressed fully and appropriately at the upcoming hearing. Warren Chu gave a brief interview in which he used the word unfortunately 4 times in 90 seconds and said that his client had nothing but compassion for her estranged husband's evident distress. The statement generated 300,000 more views on the original video. On the morning of the 4th day, Zarya's cousin called. Jaemin was in the middle of the morning session when Zarya's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked at him. I need to take this, she said. Take it, he said. She stepped into the corridor. He sat and listened to the muffled half of a conversation he couldn't parse, short responses, one longer exchange, then quiet. She came back with her phone in her hand and her face arranged in the careful way that meant she was processing something significant. The license image, she said, the one used to open the account. My cousin got access to the metadata through a contact at Pacific Federal's compliance department. The image file was created 11 months ago on a device running editing software. The original source file was a scan, a photocopy of a license, but the address field was modified. The address on the original scan was different from the address on the account application. Different how? Jaemin said. Different address, she said. Same name, same photo. But the address used to open the account is my current address. The address on the original scan, she paused, is an address I didn't move to until 8 months ago. He looked at her. They used an older copy of your license, he said, one from before you moved, and they updated the address field digitally to match your current address so it would pass verification. Yes. Who had an older copy of your license? She was quiet for a moment. Meridian, she said. HR. When I was hired, I submitted a copy of my license, 14 months ago. The timing landed like something dropped from a height. 14 months. The account was opened 14 months ago. She'd been hired 14 months ago. The original scan in Meridian's HR file was the source document. Someone with access to the facility's HR records had used a copy of her onboarding documents to build a fake account in her name. Someone inside the facility, the same facility where the maintenance contractor had planted a device in his room. There's someone here, Jamin said. Not just the contractor, someone on staff. Zarya's jaw was tight. I know. We need to find out who. I know, she said again. She was already thinking. He could see it, the rapid, methodical quality of her thinking when she was working through a problem, something he'd watched her apply to his rehabilitation for weeks and was now watching her apply to this. HR files are accessed through a shared administrative system, she said. Every access is logged. Name, timestamp, document viewed. It's supposed to be for compliance. She looked at him. Meridian's compliance officer is a woman named Patricia Sohn. I've worked with her for 2 years. She's clean. If I go to her with this, she'll pull the access logs. She might. Do it, he said. Today. Hannah called at 3 p.m. The print came back, she said. He gripped the phone. Whose? He said. The AFIS hit came back to a man named Terry On, Hannah said. No prior criminal record. But Terry On is employed by a vehicle maintenance company. The company has a service contract with a fleet management firm. That fleet management firm... She stopped. He could hear her breathing. Jamin, that firm has one listed client in its corporate filings from 14 months ago when the service contract was first signed. One client, listed as a reference for the firm's commercial license application. Tell me, he said. Dae-hyun Kang, Hannah said. The fleet management firm was vouched for by your brother. The room went very bright for a moment. Or maybe nothing changed and it was just the interior light of everything finally coming into full resolution. The whole shape of it, visible at once, all the pieces arranged in the pattern they'd always been arranged in, just finally lit correctly. He hired the mechanic, Jamin said. He has a documented financial relationship with the firm that employs him, Hannah said. The print puts On at the brake assembly. Webb's footage puts Dae-hyun 3 blocks away. The service contract is the connection. Her voice was tight with the controlled urgency of someone who had been building towards something for a long time and could see it now. Jamin, this is enough for the DA's office. This is enough to compel a reopened investigation. Will they move before the hearing? I'm calling the DA's office the moment I hang up with you, she said. I have a contact. She owes me a professional conversation. I can't promise what she'll do with it, but I can promise she'll read it today. Do it, he said. And Hannah, file a motion to introduce the footage and the print connection as new evidence at the hearing, even if the investigation hasn't been formally reopened. I want it on the record that this evidence exists. Warren Chu will object.
Let him object, Jamin said. Let him object in a courtroom with cameras outside and 6 million people who have watched the video. A pause. Okay, she said. He hung up.
The afternoon light was different from the morning light. Warmer, lower. It came through the window at an angle that caught the jasmine vine and made it look almost deliberately tended, like something cared for. He sat in his wheelchair and looked at it and took a breath that went all the way down, past the ribs, past the resistance, into somewhere he hadn't been breathing from in a long time. His hands were shaking slightly. He looked at them, studied them deliberately. Old habit. He was afraid. He hadn't admitted it in weeks. Not the ambulance fear or the diagnosis fear or any of the earlier fears, but this specific fear, the fear of the courtroom 6 days away, the fear of a system that had already been bent in the direction against him, of a judge who had seen the amended petition and the declarations and the interview and all of it arranged into a shape designed to make him look like a man who had lost his mind. He was afraid of being taken apart in public, in a room where Dae-hyun would be sitting in the back row with the expression that was trying to be concern. He sat with the fear for a moment and let it be real. Then Zarya came back from the HR building. She walked in and she looked like she'd been running, not literally, but in the way people looked when they'd been moving fast through something urgent. Her breathing was slightly elevated, her hair had come loose on one side, and she was carrying a printed document that she set on the tray table in front of him. "Patricia pulled the logs," she said. He looked at the document. "The HR file containing my license scan was accessed 4 times in the past 14 months, she said. Twice by HR staff in the normal course of onboarding. Once by the facility director during an administrative audit. She pointed at the 4th entry. Once, 11 months ago, by a user account registered to the Meridian Maintenance and Facilities Department. The account belongs to a man named Daniel Cho." He looked at the name. "No relation to your Cho," she said quickly. "Different person. Daniel Cho has worked in Meridian's Facilities Department for 3 years. He's the primary contact for external contractor relationships." "Including the irrigation subcontractor," Jamin said. "Including the irrigation subcontractor," she said. He looked at her. "Patricia is taking it to the director," Zarya said. "It's going to become an internal matter. But I've already photographed the log. It's documented." He picked up the page, looked at the 4th access entry, the timestamp, the account name, the file accessed. Small, clean, irrefutable, the kind of evidence that didn't require interpretation. "This connects Meridian's inside person to the license theft," he said. "And the license theft to the fabricated account," she said. "And the fabricated account to everyone who needed my room to be listened to," he said. She sat down. For the first time all day, she looked tired. The real kind of tired, not the managed tiredness of someone running on professional obligation, but the deep cellular exhaustion of someone who had been fighting on too many fronts for too long. He understood that tiredness with his whole body. "How are you?" he said. She looked at him. The question seemed to catch her slightly off guard, which he understood because he didn't ask it often, and when he did, he meant it. "I've been better," she said. Honest. No decoration. "Yeah," he said. They sat together in the afternoon light for a moment that had no agenda. He was aware of her beside him, the specific warmth of her presence, the way the room felt different when she was in it versus when it was just him and the ceiling and the hum of the fluorescent tube. He'd been aware of it for weeks and had been storing it in the same interior space where he kept things he wasn't ready to look at yet. He thought about looking at it now, about saying something. His phone rang. Hana. He looked at Zarya. She made a small gesture, take it, and stood to give him space, though she didn't leave the room. "The DA's office called back," Hana said. The controlled urgency was still in her voice, but underneath it now was something else. Something that sounded, cautiously, like the beginning of relief. "They're not reopening the investigation formally before the hearing, but they've issued a subpoena for Dae-hyun's financial records related to the fleet management firm. And they've requested that Webb present the excluded footage and the print result to their office by end of business tomorrow." "That's not formal reopening," Jamin said. "No, but it means the investigation is no longer closed. It means any motion Warren Chu files to exclude the footage at the hearing has to contend with an active subpoena from the DA's office. He can't bury it." "Does Dae-hyun know?" "The subpoena was served 2 hours ago," Hana said, "to his home address." Jamin closed his eyes, just for a second. Dae-hyun sitting in a house he'd built on the assumption of permanence, being handed a piece of paper that told him the permanence was over. Dae-hyun, who had watched a car go in the dark and driven home and called 2 days later with a suit that cost too much. "What does he do now?" Hana said. Not a strategy question, a real one. "He calls Warren Chu," Jamin said, "and then he does what panicking men always do. He makes it worse." "Are you prepared for what that looks like?" "Yes," he said. He was not sure he was, but he said yes because the alternative was to say no, and no was not a direction he was going anymore. 2 days before the hearing, Dae-hyun called. The number came up on his phone, and Hae-min looked at it for 2 full rings before answering. "Dae-hyun," he said. "Jae-min." His brother's voice was different, the practiced architecture of it, the careful arrangement of older brother authority and performative concern, had collapsed into something raw and more afraid. "I need to talk to you." "You're talking to me." "Not like this. In person. I need—" "In person," Jamin said. "Please."
The word came out cracked, like it had broken on the way out. Please, Jaemin, I need to explain. He looked at the window. The jasmine was moving in a morning wind. The stone bench was empty. The groundskeeper had trimmed the grass near the fence line sometime in the past few days. He'd noticed this morning that the edges were cleaner. There's nothing to explain, Jaemin said. I know what happened. You don't?
Terion's fingerprint, Jaemin said. The fleet management firm. The service contract with your name on it. The traffic camera footage placing your vehicle 3 blocks from the accident. He paused. The DA has the subpoena. Silence on the other end. Long enough that he might have thought the call had dropped, except for the sound of his brother's breathing. Unsteady, compressed. The breathing of someone trying to hold something together that was already falling apart.
I didn't know they were going to... Daehyun started. Don't, Jaemin said. I didn't know it would... Daehyun. His voice was quiet, completely quiet. Stop. Another silence, different from the first one. You're my brother, Daehyun said. The word brother came out broken all the way through. I know what I am to you, Jaemin said. He hung up.
He sat with the phone in his hand and looked at his useless legs and thought about 30 years and their father's face and 100 meals and 1,000 conversations and the way resentment built itself so slowly in a person that neither of you noticed until it had become the whole architecture of who they were. He sat with it. Then he put the phone face down on the tray and looked at the door. Zarya was standing in the doorway. She'd knocked. He hadn't heard it. The hearing's in 2 days, she said. I know. She looked at him, the full, undeflected look she gave things when she decided to be present with them. How are you really? He looked at her. Tired, he said. Angry, ready. She nodded. Came in, sat down across from him in the chair. Ready's the one that matters, she said. He looked at her face in the morning light, the strong jaw, the eyes that assessed without assuming, the scar on her wrist half visible below her sleeve, and felt the thing he'd been storing move in him like something that had finally run out of room to be stored. Zarya, he started. His phone lit up. Hana, marked urgent. He looked at Zarya. She nodded once. Take it. And something passed between them that had the shape of a sentence neither of them said yet. He answered. Serafina's team filed an emergency motion this morning, Hana said. Her voice was tight and fast. They want the hearing moved up, 24 hours. They're claiming new evidence requires immediate judicial review before... What evidence? Jaemin said. A pause. They say they have a witness, Hana said. Someone who will testify that the financial records you released in the video were fabricated. Someone who will testify that the Morella account documentation was altered. She paused. Jaemin. They say the witness is someone who helped you prepare the video. He went cold. Who? He said. Hana said the name, and the world shifted under him in a way that the wheelchair couldn't account for. A foundational shift, deeper than the accident, deeper than the brake lines and the darkness and the 11 days of unconsciousness, because the name Hana said was the name of the one person who had been inside every conversation, every strategy session, every moment of genuine vulnerability since the beginning. The one person he had not once considered. The one person standing, the name Hana said was Steve, the paralegal. The quiet man who sat at the end of the table and took notes and said nothing and was present for every strategy conversation, every document review, every moment where the shape of the case was discussed with the assumption that the room was sealed. Jaemin sat with the phone against his ear and felt the cold move through him in a wave. Not the cold of surprise, because somewhere in the architecture of his thinking, a piece had always been slightly loose. A small discrepancy he hadn't examined because he'd been looking at larger targets. Steve had been Hana's. Hana's hire, Hana's trust, Hana's office. How long? Jaemin said. Hana's voice was compressed and precise in the way of someone managing something that was eating them alive. I don't know. He resigned this morning. Left a letter on my desk. He's claiming the documents you showed in the video, the Morella transfer records, were given to him to scan and upload, and that during that process he became aware that certain metadata had been altered. Had it. No, Hana said, flat and hard. The records are clean.
I've had 2 independent forensic accountants look at them. The chain of custody is documented. The metadata is original. She paused. He's lying, but he's lying in a direction that sounds technical enough to require expert rebuttal, and Warren Chu filed the motion at 6 a.m., which means they've had him prepared and positioned for days. They turned him before the video, Jamin said. Almost certainly.
He closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Steve had been in the room when Jae-min told Hana about the device in the smoke detector. Steve had been present when the web meeting was discussed, when the DA contact was named, when the forensic accountants were retained. Not everything. Some conversations Jamin had been careful to have without Steve present. Some instinct he hadn't fully trusted, sharpening late and imperfectly into something useful. But enough. Enough to know the shape of the defense. Enough to build a counter. The hearing, he said. Still tomorrow. The emergency motion to move it up was denied. The judge said 24 hours wasn't sufficient notice for a schedule change, which is the one thing that went our way this morning. Hana's voice was tight. But Jae-min, if they put Steve on the stand and he testifies that the financial records were manipulated, he'll be cross-examined, Jae-min said. Yes. Under oath. Yes. Then that's where he falls apart. He said it with a certainty that was not bravado. It was the specific confidence of a man who had spent 20 years reading people and had, in retrospect, read Steve correctly from the beginning, had simply made the mistake of filing the reading under low priority rather than active concern. Steve was not, at his core, a man built for the pressure of cross-examination. He was a man built for the comfortable middle distance, for the background, for the notes, for the position of useful invisibility. Put him on a stand under oath with Hana across from him and the forensic accountant's findings and evidence and the documented chain of custody in front of a judge who had read everything. He'll fold, Jamin said. I need him to fold in the first 20 minutes, Hana said, because we have a full day of hearing and I need the momentum. He'll fold in 10, Jamin said. Get me there. Yen. Zarya was still in the chair across from him when he hung up. She'd heard the call, not the words, but the weight of it, the particular quality of Jamin's silences during it, and she was watching him with the careful, present attention she gave things when she decided not to look away. Steve, she said. Yes. She absorbed this without visible shock, which he found, in a distant part of himself, characteristic of her. She processed fast and clean and didn't waste energy on surprise once a thing was confirmed. How long do you think? She said. Weeks, probably, he said. After the video was announced, maybe longer. Can Hana beat it? Yes. He looked at her directly. But I need to tell you something else. The hearing is tomorrow, and with Steve's testimony and the emergency motion, Warren Chu is going to come in looking to end this fast. The conservatorship case, the character assault on both of us, all of it. He's going to try to close it in one session before anything else can surface. So we need to close it first. We need to be ready for everything. He paused. Which means I need to know if there's anything about your situation, the fabricated account, the previous patient, anything that you haven't told me. Anything they could use that I don't know about. She looked at him. There's nothing, she said. Nothing they could frame, Jae-min. Her voice was quiet and certain in equal measure. There's nothing. He held her gaze for a long moment. Okay, he said. She stood. She came to stand beside his chair, beside him, close enough that he could see the small scar on her wrist in the morning light. She put her hand on his shoulder, briefly, the way you touch someone when the words are inadequate but the presence isn't. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, he said. Her hand left his shoulder. She picked up her bag. At the door she paused. Jae-min. She didn't turn around. What you said before Hana called. What you were starting to say. He waited. Say it after tomorrow, she said. When it's done. Say it then. She left. He sat in the morning light with his hands in his lap and the weight of everything balanced on a single day he hadn't reached yet. The courtroom was Department 47 of the Los Angeles Superior Court, and it was smaller than he'd expected. Not the cathedral-sized chamber of legal dramas, but a practical, slightly worn room with fluorescent lighting, not unlike the hospital, and a judge's bench that elevated Judge Helena Marsh about 3 feet above everyone else, which Jae-min registered as intentional and appropriate. He arrived in his wheelchair with Hana on his left side and a second attorney named Vera Cruz, whom Hana had brought in specifically for cross-examination, on his right. The gallery was half full with press, notebooks, phones held low, the quiet, professionally observant posture of people whose job was to witness and record. Serafina was already seated at the opposing table. She was wearing gray, understated, calibrated to suggest a woman who had moved past the need for display. Warren Chu sat beside her with the comfortable authority of a man who believed he had already won. Dae-hyun was in the gallery's third row. He looked smaller than he had in the rehabilitation room. The suit was the same, expensive, slightly wrong, but he was wearing it differently, like something that no longer fit the body underneath it. He didn't look at Jae-min when Jae-min entered. He looked at the table in front of him and kept looking at it. Zarya sat in the gallery's first row, directly behind the bar. She was in a dark blazer and she held her hands folded in her lap, and she looked forward without expression. The posture of someone who had decided exactly how much of themselves they were going to spend on this and had reserved the rest. Judge Marsh entered and everyone stood, and Jae-min used the wheelchair's armrest to push himself to a standing position, imperfect, effortful, shaking slightly in the left leg, and stood for the 12 seconds it required. He sat back down. Hana glanced at him sideways. He looked forward. Warren Chu opened with the conservatorship argument, and he was good, methodical, measured, building the case brick by brick with the declarations and the psychological evaluation and the testimony of Kevin Tran, who sat in the witness box and recited his prepared account of Jae-min's alleged instability with the smooth, slightly too consistent delivery of someone who had rehearsed it many times. Vera Cruz cross-examined Tran in 15 minutes and documented efficiently and without drama that Tran had been terminated for financial misconduct, that he had received assistance from Warren Chu's firm in the form of pro bono legal advice on an unrelated matter, and that his declaration had been prepared with the help of a paralegal from that same firm. Tran's composure held through the cross-examination, but his eyes moved wrong, too much, too fast. The involuntary tracking of a man whose internal confidence was running lower than his external presentation suggested. Steve was called in the afternoon. He came in looking like a man walking toward something he wished he could stop walking toward. He was 29, with the soft, unremarkable features of someone who had spent his professional life ensuring he was never the most memorable person in a room. He sat in the witness box and answered Warren Chu's questions with careful precision, describing the document scanning process, describing his alleged discovery of metadata inconsistencies, using technical language that had clearly been rehearsed with someone who understood how to make plausible-sounding lies. Then Vera Cruz stood up. She was 53 and had been a litigator for 26 years, and she approached the witness box the way certain people approach difficult terrain, not aggressively, not carefully, but with the completely unhurried confidence of someone who knew exactly where the ground was solid and where it wasn't. "Mr. Steve," she said, using only his last name, "you testified that during the document scanning process you observed metadata inconsistencies. Can you describe the specific software you used to view that metadata?" Steve named a software. "And when did you download that software?" A hesitation. Small, but visible. "I already had it installed," Steve said. "On your work laptop, the laptop issued by Ms. Park's firm?" "Yes." "The IT records from Ms. Park's firm show no record of that software being installed on any firm-issued device," Vera said. "Would you like to revise your answer?" Another hesitation, longer. The courtroom had a particular quality of silence now. The silence of people who had stopped taking notes because they didn't want to miss anything. "I may have used a personal device," Steve said. "You brought a personal device to a confidential document review session without disclosing it to the supervising attorney?" Yes or no, Mr. Steve?" "Yes." "And on this personal device, on this software that doesn't appear in any professional record, you allegedly discovered metadata inconsistencies in documents that 2 independent forensic accountants, whose reports are in evidence as Exhibits 14 and 15, found to be completely unaltered." Vera set a page on the edge of the witness box. "This is the contact log from your personal phone for the 7 days before you resigned. Item 4 on that log is a 47-minute call to a number registered to an associate at Warren Chu's firm. Can you explain the nature of that call?
Steve looked at Warren Chu. The judge said, "The witness will answer." Steve's voice had lost its rehearsed quality entirely. What remained was younger and more frightened. I had questions about. You had a 47-minute conversation with opposing counsel's associate 6 days before you submitted testimony supporting opposing counsel's case, Vera said, while you were still employed as a paralegal by the attorney representing Mr. Kang.
The room was completely still. Steve said nothing. No further questions, Vera said, and sat down. Well, the afternoon moved fast and without mercy. Hannah presented the financial documentation, the Morella account, the 11 months of transfers, the chain of evidence clean and sourced and cross-referenced, and the forensic accountants testified in sequence, each one precise and technical and utterly unambiguous in their conclusion that the records were original and unaltered. Then Hannah presented the surveillance device, the water glass on the tray table in the photographs, the device inside it, the forensic report linking its model to a purchase made through a procurement account connected, at 2 steps, clearly documented, to the same shell company that had employed the maintenance contractor. The same shell company registered to Serafina's maiden name. Warren Chu objected to each piece. Judge Marsh overruled most of them with the brief, slightly weary precision of a judge who had been on the bench long enough to recognize when objections were procedural obstruction rather than substantive challenge. Then Hannah called Jaemin. He wheeled to the witness box and transferred to the fixed chair with the same effortful imprecision he'd used to stand that morning, not performing it, just doing it, which was its own kind of statement. He answered Hannah's questions directly and without elaboration, and when Warren Chu cross-examined him, he answered those questions the same way. He didn't perform innocence. He didn't perform victimhood. He stated facts and said, "I don't know when he didn't know," and corrected Warren Chu twice when the attorney misstated documented evidence, both times quietly, with the specific, flat precision of a man who had read every page of his own case. Warren Chu sat down earlier than he'd planned. Then Zaria took the stand. She walked to the witness box with the economy of movement that was simply how she moved through the world. No theater, no visible preparation. She sat down and she looked at Hannah, and she answered every question with the same quality of clarity that she brought to everything, present, direct, and unbothered by the discomfort of saying true things plainly. The fabricated account, the metadata, her cousin's findings, the HR access log with Daniel Cho's account timestamp, the call from Webb. All of it laid out in sequence, in her own voice, with the kind of specificity that made fabrication audible by its absence. When Warren Chu cross-examined her, he tried the approach that had been used in the interview. The pattern of 2 wealthy patients, the implication of opportunism. Zaria answered each question the same way she'd answered Hannah's. She didn't get defensive. She didn't explain herself beyond what the question required. When he pushed on the previous lawsuit, she said, "The lawsuit was dismissed. The judge found no evidence of undue influence. The record is available." When he pushed further, she said, "I've answered that question." When he pushed a third time, Judge Marsh told him to move on. He sat down. Serafina was called last. She took the stand with the composed elegance of someone who had been performing composure for so long that the performance had become structural. It held her up rather than merely covering her. She was precise and controlled, and her voice carried the cultivated warmth of a woman who had decided that warmth was her most effective tool. She described the marriage, the fear, the decision to leave. She described it in the language of victimhood that was internally consistent and externally sympathetic and entirely disconnected from the $4.2 million and the Morella account and the 11 months of transfers. Warren Chu asked her about the surveillance device. "I have no knowledge of any device," she said. "I find the implication deeply upsetting." Warren Chu asked her about the Morella account. "Morella Consulting was a professional project I was developing independently," she said. "There's nothing improper about a wife having her own professional interests." Warren Chu asked her about the shell company and the maintenance contractor. "I've had no involvement with any maintenance contractor," she said. "I'm not even sure what is being alleged." Then Hannah stood. The cross-examination lasted 41 minutes. Hannah had the transfer records and the timeline. She had the Morella registration documents, filed 14 months before the accident, using an address that predated the couple's current residence by 3 years, which documented the shell company's existence as predating any reasonable claim of independent professional development. She had the shell company's single transaction record, the payment to the maintenance subcontractor's firm, dated 12 days before the accident. She had the subcontractor's statement, obtained 3 days earlier through Hana's investigator, confirming the scope of the work contracted. She laid these out one at a time. With each piece, Serafina's composure did something incremental. Not collapsing, not breaking dramatically, but receding. The way paint receded from a surface when the wrong chemical was applied, slowly and then faster. Her answers became shorter. Her voice lost the cultivated warmth and found a brittleness beneath it. Something harder and more fundamental. The real structure of a person when the architecture of their presentation was being systematically disassembled. The payment to the subcontractor firm, Hana said, made through the Morella account. What was the nature of the work contracted? Landscaping consultation, Serafina said. For a property you don't own? A pause. I was exploring development opportunities, Serafina said. The contracted property address in the invoice is the address of Meridian Recovery Center, Hana said, where your estranged husband was receiving treatment. Can you explain the nature of the landscaping consultation you required at your estranged husband's rehabilitation facility? The room was completely still. Serafina looked at Warren Chu. The look lasted 1 second too long. I'd like to take a brief recess, Warren Chu said. We're almost finished, Judge Marsh said. Miss Serafina, please answer the question. Serafina looked at her hands. She said nothing for 8 seconds. In a courtroom, 8 seconds of witness silence was an answer. I don't recall the specific nature of the consultation, she said. Hana set the invoice on the edge of the witness box. The invoice is itemized, Hana said. The sole line item reads, Installation and Monitoring Services, Interior Placement. She paused. That's not landscaping, Ms. Serafina. Something in Serafina's face finally moved. Not the cultivated expressions, but something underneath them, something older and raw. The face of a person who had been planning and managing and performing for so long that the moment when it stopped working registered as genuine shock rather than tactical adjustment. I want to speak with my attorney, she said. You may consult your attorney at the recess, Judge Marsh said. But I want to note for the record that this court has now heard testimony and reviewed documentation regarding a surveillance device planted at a medical facility, financial transfers totaling over $4 million through a concealed account, a fabricated employee identity theft, and testimony from a paralegal who communicated with opposing counsel while employed by the petitioner's own legal team. She paused. We will take a 30-minute recess. The recess lasted 47 minutes. Jaemin sat in the hallway outside Department 47 in his wheelchair, and Hana stood beside him with her arms crossed and her face carrying the expression of someone who was not yet permitting themselves to feel what they could feel. And Zarya sat in a chair against the wall with her hands folded and her eyes on the floor. Nobody said much. There wasn't much to say. When they went back in, Warren Chu approached the bench before the session resumed and had a conversation with the judge that was too low to hear from the gallery. The conversation lasted several minutes. Warren Chu's body language was controlled and professional and completely unable to hide that he was negotiating from a position of wreckage. He returned to his table. Judge Marsh looked at the room. The petitioner has moved to withdraw the conservatorship petition, she said. The court accepts the withdrawal. The petition for conservatorship over the personal and financial affairs of Jaemin Kang is denied. She paused. The court further notes that the evidence presented today regarding the surveillance device and the financial transaction record is being referred to the district attorney's office for review, which I understand is concurrent with an existing subpoena inquiry. The court's findings in that regard are documented in today's transcript. She looked at both tables with the expression of a woman who had been on the bench long enough to have seen many versions of this particular story and found none of them especially surprising. We're adjourned, she said. What? The hallway afterward was loud with the noise of press and competing voices and the particular dispersed energy of a large room emptying at once. Jaemin moved through it in his wheelchair, and the crowd parted with the instinctive courtesy people extended to wheelchairs in public spaces, which he had stopped resenting somewhere around week 4 of rehabilitation. He found Dae-hyun near the exit. His brother was standing against the wall, not moving, not leaving. He looked like a man who had somewhere to go and had discovered he couldn't remember where it was. The suit looked wrong in the corridor's fluorescent light. Too deliberate, too much effort for an outcome this bad. Jaemin stopped in front of him. They looked at each other. "The DA's investigation," Jaemin said, "is going to find what it finds. I can't stop that, and I'm not going to try." Dae-hyun's jaw moved. Something crossed his face that was not quite remorse and not quite appeal, but lived in the terrain between them, the expression of a man who wanted something he didn't have language for anymore. "She came to me," Dae-hyun said. "Serafina, she came to me first. She told me that you were going to—" He stopped. "She said you were planning to cut me out entirely, that you'd already started moving assets." "That wasn't true," Jaemin said. "I know that now." "You knew it then," Jaemin said. "You knew me for 41 years. You knew it." Dae-hyun looked at the floor. "I wanted it to be true," he said, quietly, in the voice of a much younger man. "I wanted it to be true so I'd have a reason." The hallway noise moved around them. Press and lawyers and strangers on their own trajectories, none of it touching this particular square of floor where two brothers stood in the wreckage of something that had been breaking for 30 years and had finally completed the process. "I know," Jaemin said. He meant it without softness. He meant it as the acknowledgement it was. The recognition of a truth that didn't excuse anything but also didn't require pretending it wasn't there. He looked at his brother for a moment longer. Then he moved forward. Zarya was waiting at the building's entrance. She was standing in the midday light, with her jacket over one arm and her face turned slightly toward the street, and she looked like herself, which was specific and not small. She turned when she heard the wheelchair, and she looked at him the way she looked at things she'd decided to see clearly. "It's done," she said. "It's done," he said. She nodded once, slowly, like something that had been held taut had released. He looked at her. "What I was going to say," he said, "before Hana called." She met his eyes. "I'm listening," she said. "I've been watching you for months," he said. "The way you work, the way you don't, the way you tell the truth even when the easier thing would be to manage it." He paused. "I've been in rooms with people my whole life. I've been very good at reading people, and I've been wrong about a lot of them." He looked at his hands for a moment, then back at her. "I'm not wrong about you." She was very still. "I don't know what this is," he said. "I know what it isn't. It isn't gratitude, and it isn't the proximity of difficult circumstances producing feelings that belong to the circumstances and not the people." He looked at her. "I've thought about that carefully. I've been careful about it." "I know you have," she said. "I know you have too," he said. Something moved in her face, the small, unguarded shift that he had been watching for months. The one she didn't catch fast enough when it happened. The one that was the true version of what she was feeling rather than the managed version. "It's going to be complicated," she said. "Yes," he said. "Everything about you is complicated." "Yes." "I have a career," she said, "that I've worked very hard for, that I'm not going to—" "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to." She looked at him for a long moment. "Ask me the question you're not asking," she said. He looked at her directly. "Stay," he said. "Not here. Not as my caregiver. As stay." He paused. "I don't have a better word for it yet." She looked at him. The midday light was flat and honest, and it lit her face without softening it. And she was beautiful in the specific, unsentimental way that real people were beautiful. The way that had nothing to do with arrangement and everything to do with the person behind it. "Okay," she said. "Yeah." The months that followed were not smooth. They were the kind of months that required daily decisions. To continue, to adjust, to get up again after the sessions that didn't go the way anyone planned. His left leg recovered faster than the right. His right leg recovered slower than anyone predicted, and then, around the 6th month, began to surprise them. He used a cane by month 7. By month 9, he could walk the length of the rehabilitation center's main corridor, 40 feet, uneven at the end, one hand occasionally reaching for the wall, and the first time he did it without touching the wall. He stood at the far end for a moment and looked back at the distance and felt something he hadn't expected, which was not triumph, but something quieter and more permanent. The DA's investigation moved with the pace of official processes, slower than he would have liked, faster than he'd feared. Dae-hyun's attorneys negotiated extensively. The outcome was what outcomes were when attorneys negotiated extensively: reduced, complex, and unsatisfying in the way that justice delivered through institutions was always somewhat unsatisfying to the people most directly wronged. He accepted it. He had understood since the hallway conversation that what he needed from his brother was not a particular legal outcome, but a particular acknowledgement, and he had received that acknowledgement in a corridor outside Department 47, in a voice that had sounded like a much younger man. And it was enough, and it was also not enough. And both of those things were true simultaneously and would remain so. Serafina's situation resolved separately, in a civil proceeding and a parallel criminal inquiry that took 11 months, and produced a result that recovered a portion of the transferred assets and documented the fraud in public record. He did not attend any of those proceedings. He had Hana attend and report, and he read the reports and filed them and moved forward. The criminal network, the operation, the empire, the thing he had built and protected for 20 years, he stepped back from methodically and without drama. Not in a single gesture, not in a speech or a declaration, but in the slow, practical way that real exits happened, one decision at a time, one connection at a time. The careful unwinding of something complex and not easily disentangled from the legitimate interests that had grown around it. Cho helped with the parts that required inside knowledge. Park and Shin made their adjustments when it became clear that the landscape had changed irreversibly. He didn't forgive either of them, and he didn't pursue either of them. He simply was no longer the thing they had been positioned relative to. What he built instead started small. A conversation with Dr. Osei, 6 months after the hearing, about the gap in rehabilitation resources for people who couldn't afford Meridian's rates and didn't have access to the quality of care that had, in ways he was still accounting for, kept him functional through the worst months. A conversation with Zarya about what that gap looked like from the caregiver's side, about what resources were missing, about what a facility designed around actual recovery rather than billable hours might look like if someone built it intentionally. A lease on a building in Pasadena, 18 months after the hearing. A small staff. A program built around the framework Zarya had been refining in her own practice for years, incorporating the aquatic therapy she'd wanted to introduce at Meridian, the psychological support component that rehabilitation facilities consistently undertreated, the peer support structure that recognized that the people best equipped to help someone recover were often people who had recovered themselves. He ran the financial side. She ran the clinical side. They argued about both regularly, with the particular productive combativeness of two people who respected each other's competence and refused to pretend agreement when they disagreed. He was better at numbers and infrastructure. She was better at people and process. He learned from her. She learned from him. Neither of them would have acknowledged this easily, and both of them knew it completely. The center opened without ceremony in the second year. It filled slowly at first, then consistently. And the consistency told a story that neither of them had been certain of at the beginning. That the need was real, that the approach was working, that the thing they had built from the specific wreckage of two particular lives had something genuine at its foundation. He proposed on a Thursday evening in their third year. Not in a restaurant, not with any elaborate staging. He was standing, properly standing, the cane leaning against the wall behind him, in the center's main corridor after the last patient of the day had left. And Zarya was writing session notes at the end of the hall, and he walked to where she was sitting and he stood in front of her and she looked up from the notes. He didn't have a long speech. He'd thought about having a long speech and had decided against it because everything real between them had been said plainly and without decoration, and this deserved the same. "Marry me," he said. She looked at him for a moment with the expression he had come to know as the truest version of her. The one underneath the armor and the competence and the careful management of distance. The one that came out when she'd decided the situation was safe enough for it. "You're not going to make this romantic at all, are you?" she said. "I'm standing up," he said. "For you. That's romantic." She looked at his legs. He was steady, slightly effortful, the way everything physical still was and might always be. the permanent negotiation between what the body was willing to offer and what was being asked of it. Yes, she said. They married simply. A small ceremony. The people who had earned the right to be present. Hana was there. Dr. Ose was there. Cho came and behaved himself and said something in Korean to Jae-min at the reception that made Jae-min laugh unexpectedly, which was rare enough that Zarya remarked on it later. Daehyun was not there. He sent a card with a short note that said he was glad Jae-min was well, and nothing else. Jae-min read the card once, set it on the table in the hallway, and didn't move it for a week, and then one morning it was gone, and neither of them mentioned it. In the years that followed, the center grew. New patients arrived every month, people who had been in accidents, who had been told their recoveries would be partial, who arrived in wheelchairs or on crutches, or simply with the particular hollowed posture of people who had been told by circumstances that their best days were behind them. The staff grew. The program expanded. The building next door was acquired when the lease became available. On a morning in the 4th year, Jae-min walked the full length of the center's garden without the cane. Zarya was watching from the doorway. He made it to the far end, past the bench, past the jasmine that she had insisted on transplanting from the Meridian garden before they left, which had taken poorly for the first season and then established itself with a stubbornness that felt personal. And he turned. She was leaning in the doorway with her arms crossed, and she looked at him with the expression that he had first seen in a rehabilitation room in a facility in Pasadena and had never fully been able to account for. The look that didn't pity and didn't perform, the look that simply saw. "How does it feel?" she said. He looked back at the distance he'd walked. The garden, the jasmine, the stone bench. "Like something I'll have to do again tomorrow," he said. "Yes," she said, "and the day after." "Yes." He looked at her. "Come here," he said. She came across the garden to him, and he put his arm around her without the help of anything else. No wall, no cane, just the two of them standing in the morning light in the garden they'd built. And she put her head against his shoulder for a moment, briefly, the way she did things, without excess, without ceremony, fully present, and then moving on. Because there were patients arriving in an hour, because the work was ongoing, because the point was never the destination. The point was exactly this, yet standing in the place you'd rebuilt from the ground up, in the life you'd chosen after everything that was supposed to matter had burned away, with the person who had looked at the wreckage without flinching and decided to stay anyway. The jasmine moved in the morning wind. They went back inside.